We're going to start out this morning with Sylvia, who's going to explain to you a little more about what she's doing, and also specifically to our New York Office of Mental Health people who are here and what we're going to be asking them to do in addition to the assessments that you filled out already. Sylvia, so you
Thank
talk
you.
into both these.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to say that I'm so glad I met you at the Ackerman Institute a few months ago, and it's amazing that from that meeting, this kind of happened. So, and thank you everyone for attending. I think that we had a great. Oh, you cannot hear me? Okay, how about now? See, this is why I'm a therapist and not a singer. Okay, is this better? You also don't want to hear me sing, even if I had a... No, you don't. And unless it's really, really late and you had a lot of vino, then maybe. But I thought that we had a great day one, and I'm sure we're going to have a fabulous day two. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about something wonderful that has happened to the Office of Mental Health, particularly the Suicide Prevention Initiative. We actually received a very generous grant, a federal grant. This is literally our second year. And we used that it's the Garrett Lee Smith grant, and we used this to develop 4 youth suicide prevention training centers. And there is really a lot of good stuff that is coming with this, and we are targeting at-risk youth. I'm sure I'm going to forget some, but we are working with youth in the foster care system, in the mental health system, in children of military families, young Latinas who have high rates of attempts, LGBTQ2S, 2S is for two spirits, will have really very high rates of completion. And who am I forgetting? I was still drinking my first coffee of the morning. But anyways, what I wanted to say is if you go to our website, and again, the easy way to go to our website is you Google Office of Mental Health and New York State, and you go to the suicide prevention link. There is a calendar, it's the Garrett Lee Smith calendar of events, and you're going to see that there is really a lot happening in a suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. And as I said yesterday, we are really delighted that we are adding family connections to this. Now, Friday night when we had a dinner, we introduced ourselves, but we are so many and so new to one another, so I think that we probably don't remember a lot of the names and who is doing what. But today, actually, we have 3 of the coordinators of 3 of the youth centers, the Garrett Lee Smith centers. So I would like to invite them to come up and introduce themselves again and give you their contact information so that you know who they are. And Miriam is not. She's what? She's okay. Well, one of them is still on the train. Also, as part of this grant, we are going to ask if you are working in New York State to fill out an evaluation, and Katsia is going to tell you a little bit more about this. The evaluation is going to do a number of things for us, but one thing is that we're really interested, it's going to be part of a statewide research, if you will, study, because we're trying to see who are the people that are receiving training, what they think about the trainings, and also kind of we like to know if people are going to be using these trainings. For instance, if you are a clinician making a referral. And so the form there are 2 parts to it. One, there is, we are asking you if we can contact you, and if you check yes, it does not mean that somebody will call you. It means that maybe somebody will call you to just ask that, more information about what did you think about the training, did you use the training, And the second part is kind of a little bit longer, and we ask you to be patient and to do it. And there are some demographic questions there. And the reason for that is, again, that we really would like to know who are the people who are getting the training. So having said this, I know we have a long day, so I'm going to introduce Katsia from New York Foundly.
So good morning, everyone. Am I talking into both? Okay, not a problem. So yes, my name is Katia De La Rosa Torres. I am a youth suicide prevention training coordinator in New York City out of New York Foundling, which is a child welfare agency. I think that's the group that Sylvia forgot to mention. Youth in foster care also have high rates of ideation. And I personally, I also believe that they also have high rates of borderline personalities, which is why I'm here. But in regards to the surveys, I have them in the back for, it's only for people who live in New York State. So not everyone has to fill it out, so sigh of relief for those others, because it's a pretty, it's a lengthy survey, but like I said, we do need that information because OMH is counting. We want to know who is being trained and are they going to use these models that they're being trained on. So I hope that you are patient with us, and thank you very much. Oh, I actually have cards. I'll give out cards to anyone who needs it, you know, instead of having to write down emails in your nice little binders.
And I'm sorry, me again. And this is the evaluations are for both clinicians and family members. So if you are in New York State, whether you are a family member or a clinician, please fill out the evaluation.
And just really quick, my name is Kelly Bush. I work at Parsons Child and Family Center. It's in upstate, it's in Albany, New York. Like Ketsia has New York City. I have pretty much the right side of New York, going all the way from the top down to New York City. So if you are in that region and are looking for the same kinds of trainings, we do the gatekeeper clinical trainings, I would be the person to contact. We have been doing trainings in schools, especially colleges, for youth who are going into or are in college right now, and or just to look out for suicidal ideation in general and teaching them the awareness and things like that. I'm also a sources of strength trainer, so if and that's for middle school and high school youth. So if you have any interest in your community in the New York State area, or actually in any of the other areas, I can hook you up with that. That's a peer-to-peer, it's a leadership training for schools that looks at bullying, suicide prevention, and violence prevention in general. So I can be a contact to get you in touch with those people as well. Okay. And I'll give you, if anyone needs a card, let me know.
And Miriam Steinberg, who is on her way, she's on the train. She is actually based at Community Life. Community Life is in the Bronx. And the Community Life has like a long, I guess, tradition, if you will, of working with suicide prevention. And the focus for them is really young Latinas. I do not remember their telephone number, but well, anyway, so she'll be here soon. Okay, thank you. And
we're actually going to do a head count now of the people in New York State, just so that we know who we're giving surveys out to.
So if you are in New York State, just raise your hand. And if you are in Puerto Rico, I actually want to come and visit you in February.
Thanks so much, Sylvia. And I travel around a fair amount to lots of places and train therapists, and also do family connections training in California, Texas, other parts of the U.S., and actually in other countries. And what you're talking about, and what you're actually doing in New York is really a model for the rest of the country. I don't know if you know this, but other states are way behind in this effort. So I just want to support what you're doing. It's great. And I'm so hopeful that you'll have success with this, because that might get some other states to do something that's similar and be a national model for suicide prevention. So I'm delighted. Yeah, so lovely. Okay, so let's see. So welcome and good morning to everybody. Nice to see you here, bright and early on a Sunday morning. I don't know what you usually do on a Sunday morning, but well, it's only 5:30 for me still. But in a couple of hours, my family's going skiing without me. So that's. But I have to say, I'm actually very happy to be here. Should they? Yes, they should. They should, because it's fun to do. So we have a lot to do today, of course. We're right on schedule, so we're going to be fine. But I want to start with questions that are left over, because sometimes things percolate, and we develop questions, and sometimes things make sense when you hear them from somebody else, but then when we have to say them ourselves, it gets jumbled again. And then I want to talk a little bit about your practice last night. So start with just questions. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit as we go about avoiding validating the invalid behavior? Because that was one of the points that you touched on.
Yep.
Developed routines.
Mm-hmm.
But we haven't talked much about how do we avoid doing it later on.
Right,
As
right.
parents or as clinicians.
Right. So the idea of validating invalid behaviors is, sometimes when we get used to, I'm going to use the word dysfunction, okay, and I mean that not judgmentally, but when people are doing things that actually are not good in their life, it's not working well in their life. So say teenager not attending school regularly. It may make perfect sense given how miserable the person is, but at the same time, it's not working in your life if you're 15 and you're missing 2/3 of the school days in the year. So I just want to call that dysfunction. Okay, so no judgment, just it could make perfect sense, but it's still a problem. And so the idea is that could become so normal that we stop seeing it as dysfunction, and then we validate. And dysfunction is another way of saying it's an invalid. It's not working in some way. Don't forget, the same behavior often has both valid and invalid components, right? Cutting has a valid component, right? In other words, it does bring relief to people who cut, not to everybody. Some people, if you cut it, would just hurt, right? But for others, it brings relief. So it's valid in that way, but it's invalid in many other ways. So for example, cutting creates more dysregulation and creates further need to find ways to find relief. And then, of course, if the person doesn't have other ways of finding relief, then cutting becomes self-perpetuating. So it's invalid in the sense of it's not leading to a really healthy, vibrant life. It's actually getting in the way of that. So it's not valid as a life, as a life skill. You wouldn't say self-harm as a life skill, right? And so, but when they become kind of normative in your family, you stop seeing it as dysfunctional. You stop seeing it as not valid behavior. You only see that it's what the person does, and it's, so that the kid who's not going to school a lot hasn't been going to school a lot. The kid says, I'm not going to school today. You say, okay, honey. You try to be nice. Say, okay, I'll give you a call later in the morning. And that's validating the invalid. The idea is not that one should, the alternative, of course, is like, what do I have to do? Do I have to fight with the kid every morning? Because it sometimes seems like that's the only other alternative. And of course, in Family Connections, what we're saying is we've got to try to find a third path that's not using force and coercion and invalidating the valid, but also not using support for the dysfunction, which is validating the invalid. We're trying to find some other way, which would be maybe sitting down with the kid, maybe even with the therapist, but maybe not. Maybe just with the family saying, look, we understand how it's so hard to go to school. You wake up, your sleep cycle is upside down. You're embarrassed when you go to school. You've missed a lot of school. You're behind in your classes. There's all kinds of, and you go through all the reasons why would make it hard to do, and say, so we've got to get you to school. We've got to come up with a plan despite all these things that get in the way, we've got to come up with a way to get you to school starting next week. So we've got this week to work on maybe reconnecting with some friends, and so that you have some social support when you get there. We got this week to get your sleep cycle worked out, so you're waking up in the morning instead of in the afternoon. And we got this week to contact your teachers so that they can be validating of you coming and not just invalidating of you not having been coming. So in other words, I'm just making up the problem solving. I would say that's the middle path. That's neither validating the invalid nor invalidating the valid. Like, it's really hard to do. There are all these hurdles, all these things that make it hard, and we have to do it. Right? That's tough. And of course, sometimes that's something we can do just as a parent or just as a partner or as a friend or as a sibling. And sometimes it takes more. Sometimes it takes a whole committee of people to help do that when problem behaviors get entrenched. Okay. So that's what I mean by not validating the invalid. That doesn't mean we're critical and contemptuous and judgmental of the invalid. It means that we call it for what it is. If you're 15 and not going to school, that's a problem. That's all. That may not be nice to hear. It may be scary. It may elicit all kinds of fear, and it's true. You don't keep going to school. That just creates more problems in your life. Ooh, meeting has lost connectivity here. We got a problem, Houston. Yes. Fortunately. I'm sorry? Uh-huh. All right, well, Sam will work on getting that back. So yes, where's our roving microphone? Let me give you our... I have too many wires. It was working over there where Perry was yesterday. Ah, okay. Hello? Okay, so, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Alan, how about dishonesty and behavior that sometimes it's used to validate and more that we're always, whatever the story is, it's not honest.
Yeah. Dishonesty is a tricky one for lots of different reasons, because just the term dishonest elicits judgments, doesn't it? Like, one shouldn't be dishonest, right? It's very tricky. And if we, on the other hand, if we reword it, it starts to sound like we're sanitizing a problem, right? Like if I point out, for example, if my sister makes soup and I really don't like it, but I say, hey, this is great soup, you wouldn't call that dishonest, probably. You'd call that kind, right? So, but then if we say that, and if I say that in the context of what you're talking about, it sounds like we're sanitizing a problem. And so what we've got to do, again, is we've got to find a way that's between those two poles, that's not judgmental on the one hand, but also doesn't sanitize. Sanitize is another word for validating the invalid, that we also don't validate the invalid about dishonesty. Or what I might simply say, maybe one way to do that is to say, okay, it's not accurate. It's not an accurate description. We talked about accurate expression. So if we just come back to the model, we say, well, if we're going to talk about it descriptively, it's not accurate. And then we can say, is it a problem? Okay, so when I say I like the soup, that's not accurate, and it's not a problem. Okay? There is a piece that's accurate, which is that I'm showing appreciation and thinking about her possibly hurt feelings. Okay? And then, okay, yeah, thanks, Sam. So what's the middle path? So I would say so let's say you're my sister or daughter. What do you want to be? So this is the situation. And what are you telling me Can we play this out? Can we play with this a little bit? No, not the soup. About whatever you're thinking about that's dishonest. You know, I want to take your situation. I mean, that was just to provide an alternative poll. My point is that this is not the situation of the soup, right? That's my point, okay? And we have to be careful not to fall into the judgments. We've got to find something that's between those, because the judgments are invalidating the entire set of things. And I'm going to try to do this in a way that finds the valid thread without validating the invalid parts. Okay, the sanitizing over here, I'm arguing is actually not appropriate when it's a serious problem. Okay, well, saying you like the soup when you really aren't that crazy about the soup is not a serious problem, right? You might decide that that's actually, the kindness is more important. Okay, but that's not this situation. I'm saying that's not. So we don't want to go to that poll and sanitize and pretend it's not a big deal, because it probably is. At the same time, we don't want to go to the other side and invalidate whatever valid parts there are of it, which is not the dishonesty part, but probably the emotion associated with it, its function. So tell me what. Of course. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. And am I your parent? What's your situation? I'm your dad. I'm your dad, and you've come late, and I don't believe that there was an accident. Okay, so I might say, you know, later, not right now, because now is not the moment to do it. And I might say, you know, I have a question, because I want so much for our relationship to be better, and I want our relationship to be good, and I want to respond to you in a way that's validating of valid things, but I also want to make sure that what you tell me is accurate and truthful. Well, no, hang on. Honey, you seems like you're feeling attacked, and I want you to notice I'm not attacking you. No, hang on, just for a second. Put yourself in my shoes. You have told me many times about things that you've not been forthcoming about, that you've not been honest about, right? So I'm not saying this is one of those moments. I'm saying that we have that history together. And you've told me lots of things in your life that are perfectly accurate and truthful. Okay? You've done both. What I'm telling you is it's hard for me to necessarily know. Sometimes it's hard for me to know. And so I'm wondering if there are ways that you could, if I could understand what pushes you to sometimes be not truthful, then I don't have to be judgmental of it, but I can help you change it. My goal is for me to be accurate and truthful with you, and for you to be accurate and truthful with me. That's my goal. I want to support you in that, and but I don't understand when you're not. I'm actually not attacking you. I want you to notice that I'm actually not. I'm trying to understand. So if you could help me understand, like maybe pick a situation, and maybe this is one, and maybe this isn't. This isn't a big deal, so I thought it might be a good one if you just happen not to have been accurate at the moment. But maybe there's a different one you'd rather talk about. You could help me understand what pushes you to not tell the truth in that moment. That would be so helpful to me. Yeah. Now this is it. Don't forget. In our dance, right? Part of this dance, assuming that you're correct about, I'm assuming that she's told lots of lies on certain important things, right? But I also want to point out she's probably told lots of truths too about important things. It's just that the ratio is just not really very satisfying, right? So what I'm using is relationship mindfulness, since that's our topic, to try to put myself in your shoes. What would get me to say there was an accident when there wasn't? What would? What would get you to do that? Right. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a really good hypothesis. So, and that's why if I come at this in a non-judgmental way and keep pointing out that I'm not attacking you and I understand, and that we still have a goal of being truthful with each other, I'm making it possible for you, maybe the fourth or fifth time we have this conversation, to say, I feel so ashamed of myself and I can't stand it. At which point I can say, okay, so what could I do? Because sometimes you might do stuff that I don't like, but about which I'm not wanting you to feel shame. It's just a problem we gotta work on. Okay, how can I help you be aware of that so that you tell me the truth anyway? Recognizing I'm trying to try really hard not to shame you, but I don't also want you to notice that I cannot like something. That doesn't mean I don't love you. I cannot like something. If I stay regulated and I stay in my centered place, what we might call wise mind, okay, then I'm not trying to make you feel ashamed. I don't think that's a nice way to get you to change your behavior. Now, having said that, if you're my daughter, it might take several conversations before we break through. It might take several before you even acknowledge that you haven't been truthful. But notice I've given you room to say, to stick with this story, that maybe there was an accident on Route 95, because maybe today was the day that there was. I don't know. But you're pretty sure I'm agreeing with you. It's probably not. And I think I'm guessing, I don't know your daughter, but feeling so ashamed about being late is a very good hypothesis. So you're doing a nice job trying to understand. But I think if you find this middle path where you express yourself accurately and non-judgmentally and do a little mind reading, like I'm guessing that this is just, something gets in the way, that you start to lay a foundation where it's okay to have this conversation. So, does that help at all? By the way, none of these things, I want to just be clear, in none of these cases is the idea that, this is not epiphany family connections, okay? Right? This is not like, aha, and then you do it and everything is perfect, okay? That's not it, okay? I personally have never had that experience as a human being, for myself, for any patient, for any loved one. I've never seen epiphanies lead to particularly important behavior change without a lot of work after the epiphany, okay? So I don't think the epiphany is the particularly important part of it. So that's not it. What the goal here is for you to have a way where you can feel settled in your part of it. And over time, the idea is that's not going to do any harm to your loved one. And it may not actually get your daughter to be more truthful. Well, let's just be clear, it may not. And I just want to emphasize, it may not. And that's not the goal. The goal is that your part of the dance is now something you can be proud of. And that may influence your relationship with her, which might help some other aspect of the relationship, and she may stay untruthful on certain things. Or maybe down the road, it's easier for her to be more truthful. I don't know about that one. That's a lovely secondary goal. The primary goal here is that actually you're more content with your part of the dance. And that's our goal in Family Connections, is for us to be able to act in ways that it's that direct part that we actually then look at ourselves and say, that was pretty good, that was better. And over time, that's going to have salutary effects in lots of small ways with our loved one. And it may not be directly that target that changes. Her truthfulness may not. Maybe never, but maybe not right away. But it might improve your relationship, which then is good for her also. So there are secondary ripples, and I don't think they're like way out there. I mean, they're right here, but we're not trying to get you to directly go after making your loved one's life better. We're not trying to make you into a better therapist. We're trying to help you have your part of the transaction be better for you, which is then good for the other person, which is then good for you too, by the way. But that's, So my goal is not like, I don't know if that's going to help her be more truthful, but I'm pretty sure that would help you feel good about it and maximize the chance of her being truthful. and not making it worse. Not making it worse is our very first goal, and not a trivial goal, not making it worse. Anybody ever make it worse? Yeah, yeah. Hello, welcome. Welcome to the species. Yes? Do you have the microphone? Microphone? There you go. Yeah. You're a boy? Well, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Let me be clear. I'm not trying to help anybody be a therapist, okay? I don't want you to feel, no, but, yeah, yeah, hang on, hang on. All I'm saying is that we have skills. We, of course, have to match how we do that skill to the person we're talking to. Of course we do. Boy, girl, age, developmental level, present state. There's all kinds of things we have to take into account. But the principles are the same. The principles are the same. So if you were, like, for example, the principle would be if you're presently feeling really ashamed about this and I'm upset about it, that's not the time to talk about it. That doesn't matter who the other person is. That's just a principle that's going to be accurate across the board. The principle of getting to the place where I'm not judgmental and ready to invalidate the valid, that's going to be true regardless of who the other person is. The principle of not glossing over dysfunction and therefore validating invalid things, that's going to be true regardless who the person is. Being able to connect with you in a way that I help you notice that I'm not doing either of those things is going to help. Now, how you do that is going to be very different if you've got an 11-year-old or 12-year-old as opposed to an 18-year-old or a 35-year-old. It's going to be different. And their developmental abilities, how verbal or less verbal they are, and so forth. Like if you're a person who likes to play basketball, we might have this conversation while playing a game of horse out in the backyard. Okay, so we have to know our loved one. Okay, that distraction of playing the basketball game could help somebody actually titrate the intensity of the conversation. For somebody else, it would be completely distracting. So I'm trusting that you can sort those individual differences out, and you have to sort that out. But the principles are the same. And I guess the reason that I want to be careful about it, what you're saying is completely valid, but I don't want to trouble Family Connections leaders with that, because then you're worried. I don't want you to worry about it. The principles are what you're trying to get out there. People will bring in their practice from last week. They'll bring in very idiosyncratic examples of things, and you'll help them sort those out. But they're applying the same principles across the board to different situations. Yeah.
I was wondering, in listening to this and checking out with you, I'm hearing what might be a struggle with that concept of validation.
Yeah, it's complicated.
If you really validated a person, you can't, in essence, validate the invalid because it's non-judgmental. You're not talking about approval or agreement. You're talking about a connection, a family connection, and the acknowledgement of the person's emotions and that you're hearing it. You're not evaluating the content as much, so you're not necessarily, you don't need to get stuck in it, and it's right or wrong, you're hearing it, and that's what it sounded like.
Absolutely.
Moving at.
Right. I just want to be careful.
Maybe it's that struggle of validation. I wonder if it's being
Well, I think that I just think it's a complicated thing, because actually we're not trying to validate the person. We're validating the person's experience that's valid and behavior that's valid, and trying not to validate behaviors that aren't valid. Okay? And so think of it as a sorting process. Okay? But in order to get there, we have to first let go of our judgments. And we have to regulate our own emotion, because if For example, if I'm afraid to talk to you because I'm afraid of how you're going to blow up, I'm going to bring that fear with me in a big way, and then that's going to get in the way. You're going to react to that. Hang on, wait. So, and then my arousal that gets in the way of what you experience, you might not hear my fear as fear. You might hear it as, oh, Dad's upset with me, and then you're triggered and gone, and we can't have that conversation. So the principles are still the same. I've got to let go of my judgment. I've got to find the valid thing to validate, or at least make it clear that's what I'm trying to do. Part of my reason for bringing up is because I don't want to validate the invalid, okay? That's supporting your dysfunction. So I've got to, this is a lot of things to do, by the way, okay? This is a lot of things to do. This takes practice. It takes practice over, each piece of this takes practice before we put it together, like, you know, like a symphony, you know? So it's kind of like, you got to be the one-man band, the one-woman band, you know? You got to just record different layers, and so you end up having a symphony, but you know, you're playing the violin on a couple of tracks, and you're, you know, playing the cello on another, and you're the brass section someplace else, and you're conducting yourself. I mean, there's a lot of parts going on here. So, yeah. No buts, no buts, no buts, no buts, no buts, no buts. Right. Well, that's the whole point, but that's not as easy as it sounds, and that's part of the thing I'm trying to emphasize. If I tell you that I hate you, okay, I don't want you to validate that. That's my feeling. Well, my feeling is that I hate you. You know, we gotta use the map and say, well, what's the accurate emotion? What's the primary? We're going to come to this in about 10 minutes. We've got to find the valid part. You hating me, that might be your present experience, but that's not really what this is about. It's about maybe you feel really ashamed. And I've got to be, if I'm going to validate something, I've got to find the valid thread to validate. And that's the really hard part. I completely agree. We want to validate. I use the word experience more than feeling because I think it's sometimes we don't know what the emotion is, the other person doesn't know what the emotion is, but we can go for experience, like you're upset. That's not actually a feeling. That's a state of arousal, okay? Or sensations. We can validate that. That's a part of the experience. Or urges. I know you'd rather like leave the room and not continue this conversation. That's an urge. It's not really. So we want to validate emotion, but we also want to validate anything else that's in the person's experience that's valid, in the way that it's valid, and not in the ways that they're not valid. Like, you know, right, like not wanting to go to school because the kid was up playing video games on the internet until 4 a.m., okay? Not wanting to go to school makes perfect sense because the kid's really tired. That does make perfect sense because the kid's really tired, and that's dysfunctional. We gotta get you off the internet by 11 o'clock so you can go to sleep, so you can get up in the morning. So, but that's the part we're trying to change. We're actually, I want to point out, we are invalidating the invalid at that moment. We're saying it's not, if you want to go to school, which is part of, you know, 15-year-old's life, being up at 4 in the morning playing video games is not valid. It's not a valid way to get to school in the morning. Right? Just descriptively, not judgmentally, just descriptively. Somebody else have a comment? Okay, yeah. Elizabeth. Yeah, sure. Great. Perfect. Sharks in bed, yeah. But that would be really scary if it happened, wouldn't it? I mean, you know, we got sharks out in the ocean. That's scary enough. I mean, what about in your bed, you know?
It's true. But anyway, so now I'm an older advisor, and I can see things that I wish I had done differently. So, but what I'm kind of getting the feeling is, we're supposed to look at now and not the past. I have a
Mhm.
desire to talk to my son, who's living in another state now, so
Yeah.
I don't have one face-to-face time with him right now, but to apologize to him and say, I'm sorry that, I made these mistakes and I wish I could change that. Is that something that's to be avoided, or it's okay to do that?
Well, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the reframe. I think that I would have one. It could be if you have the urge to do it. There's probably something very useful in doing it. I think. I want to caution you though. It sounds like it's coming from a good place. I want to make sure that you're also not judging yourself in the process. The only thing I didn't hear you say was, I did the best I could. Okay, as long as you've got that front and center too, I did the best I could, and I see how this hurt you. That sounds like a very balanced, caring message that I can't see how that would do harm. That might be very helpful. It might not, but it sounds like it would be true for you. Don't give up the part about doing the best you can, though. Don't give that part up.
He never was a good son.
Yeah.
He most often did not take responsibility, and he blamed people for his father. And so we sort of fought against it.
Yeah. You polarized, right?
And, and I think through this, and I look at this,
You missed stuff. You missed stuff.
yeah, that's, okay.
Yeah. But make sure that you're well aware at the time. Also, I don't want you. It's going to be more effective for you, and it's actually going to be probably better modeling if you can also feel sad about it, but not ashamed about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
If it's sadness that you're responding to, it sounds like a really healthy thing to do.
Yeah, I feel like
If
that
it's
makes
shame,
sense.
it's trickier.
Probably in the past, I was always beating myself up. What did I do wrong? I didn't even know it.
Right. This wasn't wrong. It just wasn't what he needed. Right. It might have even been invalidating without you realizing it. Yeah, absolutely. No, that sounds very reparative. It's very interesting. I'll tell you about a patient that I had once that she had real serious problems, very, very suicidal woman, made many suicide attempts, and was almost mute. I mean, almost. I mean, she could muster yeses and nos and I don't know, and a lot of I don't know. Okay, and the I don't know was the kind of like I'm in the middle of a hurricane and you're asking me about what I want for lunch tomorrow. How can I think about that? It's like I'm so overwhelmed by everything. I don't know. It wasn't I'm being difficult, so it wasn't a pissy I don't know. It was an overwhelmed I don't know. But so she could do yes sometimes, no sometimes, I don't know a lot. Not so much else, and it wasn't a cognitive deficit, and she was just really dysregulated a lot. So, and it turned out, and this went on for a long time, and we were treating her and doing the best we could, and she made some, I would have to say, minor progress. I mean, her suicide attempts went down, her self-harm went down, but her basic level of functioning was not much better. And this was perhaps a year later, and one of the things that she was complaining about all the time is that she had a lot of pain. And she had what she called migraines, and that she had some other pain, and that her parents had taken her to the doctor, and the doctor said, there's nothing wrong with her. And so, everybody, and the doctors, they'd gotten her good medical care, and they said there's nothing physically, medically wrong with her. And then at some point, she collapsed. She just fell down, and they took her to the ER, and they did this was a while ago. I think it was a CAT scan. I think it was before MRIs were common, and she actually had a brain tumor. It was a benign brain tumor, and it had nothing to do with that. The tumor came later. Her dysfunction had started before the tumor, so it was not that her problems were because of the tumor. It was very clear. This is and it was, I think, an occipital lobe tumor. So it was, and it was operable. It was right on the outside, and they operated right away. They took it out. It wasn't that big, and like the size of a quarter or something. But it did explain her headaches and some of her other pain. It did explain that. It made a lot of sense. And the medical people and teachers and her family members and her parents all said something like, oh my gosh, of course you have this pain. Of course you had these terrible headaches. We didn't realize, you know, and we felt, and this was the beginning of a 180-degree turnaround for her. Just the fact that they were able to validate this private behavior that there was no evidence for, that everybody told her she was crazy, that she was psychosomatic. And that started this pattern of validation, and actually 6 months later she was out of treatment and getting a job. I mean, this was I don't think actually the therapy had much to do with it. I think it was the changes that got made in the family that were absolutely, I think there's very good evidence that we were irrelevant to that. Maybe we kept her alive long enough for that to happen, I don't know. But so the power of being able to find, but you know, that's an outrageous story, okay, and this is, you know, doesn't happen very often, but the power of validation for things that we have no evidence for it, but you know, maybe you're not crazy. Maybe that does make sense. That makes such a difference. You know, the sharks in the bed. Of course there are no sharks. I'm not suggesting we should ever say there are sharks in the bed, okay? But we could imagine this kid has the experience as though they are. And we don't understand how that happens. Is it a vivid imagination? Is it quasi-hallucination? Is there something else that's triggering it? You know, what? We don't understand it, but if we can validate how scared you are, okay, and how that makes it really hard to go to bed by yourself, okay, and you got to do it, by the way, because, you know, when you're 35, you can't come sleep, you know, with mom and dad, you know. That doesn't work very well in your life. It's hard to, you know, bring your date home and say, oh, mom and dad, we got company tonight, you know. It just doesn't work very well. I don't know. Maybe I should be more open-minded. I don't know. But, so, anyway, so that's my little story there. Yeah, 3.
That was my daughter. Over a period of conversations, and you know, she was being, you know, she was collapsing, you know, being and it's all your fault, and you know, all the parents, and the nicest thing that she would say. So I think over time, when we ended up going to her, and my husband and I, she said, don't let her get away with that. And this is before dad got some BPD, but she said, you need to stand up for yourself. And you just need to say, I did the best that I could. And so over time, you know, it started with that conversation, and then more about BPD and et cetera. You know, we've had more conversations about, geez, you know, I look back now, and I can remember certain situations where I was invalidated, and I feel really bad about that now. I didn't know. And at this point, you know, our relationship is like spiraled down, and there's days that back up, and it really made a huge difference. And she's in such a now, and like, it must have been hard to have me as a child.
Isn't that interesting? You see, validation of the other person's experience can make it possible for them to reciprocally then say, well, what might it have been like for you? Instead of polarizing like, you're the problem. No, you're the problem.
So it was very
Yep. We actually, one more little piece, then I want to talk about homework. I don't have a slide for this, but we did a study. This was actually now more than 20 years ago. We did a study looking at suicide attempters versus non-suicide attempters among inpatients with severe depression, most of whom were also BPD. Okay, so all inpatients, all severely depressed, almost all BPD-like, okay? But about half of them had made a suicide attempt, about half of them didn't. Okay, that's the difference. And the question was, well, maybe there's something different about family functioning in these two groups. And so we actually got parents or partners. They were a mixture of family constellations, which is a little tricky. But we got them and the patients to fill out some ordinary surveys about family functioning. And didn't show any difference. They actually were both reporting, you know, right in the middle range. Not real distressed families, but not real happy families. Kind of mildly, you know, kind of what you'd expect. It's not easy to be in that situation. But there was, and I had interviewed all these people, and there was something about this that kept tweaking me. And so what we did is we looked at, well, maybe there's some difference in perception of the families. And in fact, the whole thing just became clear as day. That in the suicide attempters, the patient felt like there were problems in the family, and the family said, no, there aren't, the problem is you. And in the non-attempters, the family was saying, we're struggling, this is hard as a family. The patient was saying, no, it's me. Okay? They didn't. Those are the ones that were saying, no, it's me, were not trying to kill themselves. Isn't that strange? Because the family was not invalidating of their experience. Family was saying, look, honey, you know, there's a lot of conflict here. We haven't been getting along. If your mom and dad haven't been getting along, that's not your fault, okay? Stuff like that, okay? As opposed to, hey, we're fine. We'd be perfect if you weren't such a mess. The only problem we have as a family is that you're trying to kill yourself. See the difference? So now and of course that's contrary to what other people predicted. Other people said, oh no, the person who says, well, I'm the problem would be much more likely to want to kill themselves. And these are all very depressed people, depressed enough to be put in hospital, okay? So that discrepancy is really important. And it's not just the discrepancy, but I see it, the concept of invalidating families was not on my mind in 1985 when we did this study, okay? So, but I think if we went back and did the study and measured validation and invalidation, what we would see is those discrepancies were all about validating and invalidating. That in the validating families, although the person was very depressed and had lots of dysfunction, they weren't trying to kill themselves. At similar levels of distress and dysfunction with the invalidation, that's when the suicide attempts happen. And again, not to blame anybody, because I think, again, it's easy to see how one can invalidate when someone's not expressing accurately, okay? But it's another dimension here. Yeah?
I missed something. So the suicide attempters, people who do not, the people who do not,
The non-suicide attempters, yeah.
they claim their problem with themselves and family.
The family was acknowledging that there were family problems, okay? And the patient was agreeing with that, but also tended to be like, well, I'm a big part of the problem. And the family was saying, well, we have problems. There was a we quality to it instead of a, no, there's nothing wrong with our family. That's the problem resides with you. Yeah.
We train on suicide prevention.
Yeah.
Our model, we talk about resources and the resources that person perceives in their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not whether they have the
Exactly.
loving family, but whether
That's right.
they see that they have the
Absolutely.
loving family.
Absolutely.
And I can see that you have two parents, you siblings, everybody loves you, but no one is validating that you're feeling
Right.
blind about
That's right.
something that happened to you.
Right. It's like we tell our patients, if your hair is on fire and your family's got a garden hose and they're trying to put it out, don't put up an umbrella.
And it's something, it's actually a story that I shared yesterday about my own daughter. I mean, I'm a professional, and when my daughter was 7, she's now a teenager. She was having a bad day. I was having a bad day. We were in the bus stop.
Yeah.
She had this face like she's devastated about something. And I think it was that her friend didn't go to school that day.
Yeah. Sure.
And I'm like, Cassandra, like, what problem can you possibly have? And I'm thinking about like the lights on was due, I got to the lights on today, and I'm like, what problem can you possibly have? Like,
Right.
you're a little girl, and she turned around and looked at me and said, "Mom, little girls have problems too." and I always share that story. and I share
Some
that story.
accurate expression going on there. Yeah.
I even share that she's very, very. I've really heard your story. And she's been that way since like birth.
Sounds like it's working, Mom.
Sometimes it works against me.
I was thinking that actually. You might want to delay that strategy a couple more years.
But it's as parents,
Yeah.
even as professionals, we tend to minimize their experience.
Right.
It's not about whether they're telling a lie. It's
Right.
What's the motivation behind
That's
it?
right.
What's really going on here? Can we
Right.
fix that? And I think it's something that you said, because I also work a lot with teenagers and teenage boys are like, I'm sitting president and I'm not doing really
Right.
well. And teenage girls are like, "Ah." But it's, maybe that's not the moment.
Right.
Maybe we've got to find a better moment to discuss. Yes, we want to talk about this lie that you told this morning, or maybe this morning, that, right now you're telling a lie, so that means that you're kind of, your brain.
You're
is not-
dysregulated now.
You're
Yeah.
dysregulated right now, and this is not the moment to talk
Yep.
about that
Yep.
lie that you just told that I'm really mad about. Maybe later when I'm a little more regulated, and you're a little more regulated, we can talk about, you know,
Yep.
how
Right.
to build this trust. I want to trust you more. I want to know the difference between when you're telling a lie and when you're telling the truth. Help me understand how to see that, how to see
Right.
when you're being honest, how to see
Right.
when you're being honest, so that we don't have to have this whole big deal.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. Please do.
And I'm saying this because it's really unusual that in this room we have sort of half an hour, so I don't know what the numbers are, but,
Yeah.
and a larger number of the nuclear commission. And what you just say, second, atonement, and at the same time, I want to raise the issue of the commission. Any one of us parents ever used the word lie, we would have a you can say it, because I was listening carefully to what you were saying. Everything else you said is so non-judgmental. You know, I want to talk to you about the slide that you just said and what caused you to say it. If we as parents said that, we would get annoyed. So you need to sort of parents, and as it relates to family connection, you need to be careful when you guys start teaching parents what to say. The concepts are there, but realize that you guys get away with a whole lot more than we get away with. And
If you got regulated kids, you could. Yeah.
you see these kids, you know, once, twice, 3 times a week, perhaps more. I don't know, 16 hours. So there's that. That's right. That's right. At the same time, what you said is very, very true. What you're talking about, you know, think of what you said, is exactly what we need as parents. We just need to find the right sort, the right moment, find the right moment, so to, and then find the right words.
Thanks. Okay, so let's switch gears just for a second. So what about your practice last night? So now, be proud. Who did the practice? Raise your hand proudly. Raise your hand proudly if you practiced. Great. Now this is exactly how we handle homework and family connections, right? It's like, and if you didn't do it, I'm not going to chastise you. I'm not even going to think a chastising thought about you because you're human beings. And I've had homework in my life I haven't done too. So first we're going to pay attention to people who did it and see what happened. Tell me what happened. How did it go? Questions. What happened? What'd you notice? Yeah.
The thing that I noticed is that off to this is all about helping, trying to help them shut through.
Uh-huh.
And you know, all the different people
So you're trying to get some help getting a shuttle. Yeah.
and is Pastor Bill from
Uh-huh.
She was very nice and kind of helpful. And I just patiently waited there while she discovered she hadn't helped. And I kept noticing, I don't think she's even paying attention to me, but she said hello to me. Now she's breathing in space and she looks at her shoulder. Oh, yeah, yeah. And that's kind of odd. She's actually breathing and like that. And she still hasn't helped me. But I did, it didn't bother me. I just thought,
Okay. So when you were being mindful of her, it actually helped you not have a bigger negative emotional reaction to what she was doing.
and I know part of it is that I have nothing on the paper.
Yeah. Sure.
So I just thought, well, I'll just send some emotions. And then she came
But that's
back.
nice, isn't it, for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very, very easy. And then she came back a while later and I was standing there looking around with everybody and she said, oh, go talk to Kevin, he'll help.
Kevin was not to be found.
But anyway, it's just that they didn't want to bother me. So then I went over to the concierge desk, and I just stood there for a while. Nobody came. And it didn't bother me. I watched the people.
Uh-huh.
And then I went over to the guy who happened to, a guy named who finally that transportation. And I went over and talked to him, and he didn't really have a lot of help.
Did you ever find Kevin?
Never found
Never found Kevin.
But the first guy said, "You will find Kevin. Go wait over there." And so I went over and watched him catch Kevin for a little while. And then he came over, and they still never got any help from me, really.
Yeah.
And finally Elizabeth said she'd drive me to the airport.
Oh,
But the thing that was really
is your middle name Kevin? Right.
the thing that was just interesting was
Yeah.
that
You know,
none of it really bothered me.
look at the take-home message there. Now, this was not benefiting. Well, I also want to point out, by the way, you made all of those people's lives nicer. You did, because the alternative would have been for you to be annoyed with them, angry with them, yell at them for not helping you. Which, by the way, in our society would be perfectly reasonable to do. You have every right to do it. Okay? It's not about rights. I want to be clear. It's not about your rights. We're not taking away your rights here. You always, skills create choices. You still have the choice to yell at somebody, criticize, complain. But they didn't have what you needed. That wouldn't have got you what you needed because they didn't have it. So you made their life nicer. That was not your goal. That wasn't my goal, actually. My goal was to make your life a little better, and it sounds like you did. Well, that's great. Good for you. We also had yeah, go ahead.
I found out myself that I did have homework because I validate until I could. Then
I didn't even ask you to validate. You're in the graduate course. I just asked you to notice. You're just precocious and run ahead. That's tonight's homework. Go ahead. You did tonight's homework. So you validated. What happened?
my husband is looking for a place to buy a house.
Yeah.
We were looking at the West, Colorado, I don't know.
Oh,
So we went to Colorado in December, and the plan is to find the practice there. But his plan is right now to go to ski, to enjoy the mountains. And I said, well,
sounds lovely. Yeah.
what is, you know,
Where's the house?
I said, oh man, I don't have time to do it right now. I'm so overwhelmed. And I like,
Skiing is important. Yeah.
it must be very hard for you. You can't have that next week. Because it must be very hard for you to really focus on your house. I know it's a lot of brain energy. And you know, but it would be important that maybe you could look at for 2, 1 a week. But then I feel like I kind of keep myself.
Yeah, it worked for a while, and then yeah.
And then my mind was trying to what I have to
How was it going? How was it? You don't have to. There's no have to. The question is, what do you get? So how was it? How did you feel, and how did he feel while you were validating? How was your relationship then?
I think it was very good. We didn't end up in a fight.
Okay.
And I would hope I'm making a very nice move today. So
Well, this sounds pretty good.
that was a good thing.
That sounds lovely. You might still not have a house, but you still have a husband. I don't know. I would like to find the middle path where you could have both, but if you had to choose, if you had to choose though, that's a good start. Well, good for you. And then we had, right next to, there was the subway incident, the train incident. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, Mary and I were together, and Mary was 4 boys sitting across the aisle, and they were so offensive, the stuff they were talking about very loudly. And but I did that exercise, this practice.
What a great place to do your practice in a difficult situation. You know, I didn't ask you to do that, by the way, but that's great that you applied it. I mean, if we get good at it and easier, it's going to be possible. And you started right out in the hard spot, so yeah. What happened?
Yeah, I just did that. I just was mindful, cut out all the thoughts and storylines, the future and the past, and just sort of with them mentally. I did feel a great shift because I just settled down, got calmed down.
Wow, what a difference. So instead of being annoyed with them, angry with them because they were doing things you didn't like, you were able to just have a pleasant ride on the subway.
Yeah, they will take a nap afterwards, so that was.
That's a radical, what a radical difference for you. That's great. That's fantastic. Good for you. I don't expect there to be these immediate lovely effects all the time. Sometimes it takes more practice, but when they happen, that's terrific.
I just wanted to make a few comments around mindfulness. I've been doing mindfulness myself for the past 4 years, and I find it extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult here to really master. I even do it with my patients, with my practice, and also with students in department of education. But it's very difficult to teach it and very difficult to do it themselves. It's really easy to say that one is doing it, but really when one starts doing it, one realizes that
There's many layers, many layers.
many layers.
Right.
I think that the advantages are enormous in terms of reducing the activity, in terms of accepting oneself the way one is, accepting others the way others are, even realizing patterns of behavior that get us in trouble, that we did not before, but we are now more able to focus on them and to accept them that they are there. But I want to emphasize how difficult it is.
Right.
We need to practice a lot, we need a lot of guidance.
Mhm. I completely agree. And I want to say, and every little piece makes a difference. So our goal in Family Connections is actually not to try to get people to take up a mindful practice, although that actually could be very helpful because that's putting another demand on family members. It's rather to use mindfulness in very specific ways, which also is practice, but it's a very applied practice right from the get-go. So letting go of judgments is a kind of mindfulness practice. Paying attention to the other person, what might your emotion be right now? That's a mindful practice, relationship mindfulness practice. We're not actually asking anybody to do any kind of meditation, not at all, not even in the slightest. If you want to, it's fine. It's a wonderful way to practice, but there's no sense, not even a suggestion that one should do that. But if you can practice being non-judgmental, if you can practice paying attention, those are the kinds of practice. And I agree, it's very hard. But I also want to just emphasize that we're not putting big demands on people. I mean, there's small ways we can use mindfulness with a little bit of practice that can make a big difference. And then, of course, mindfulness is something you can also practice in a big way for a long time and still find difficult. So I completely agree. But I don't want to scare people. This is not the sort. We want to be very applied in our use here. Yeah. I don't know. Anybody ever, if you sit down and try and follow your breath, does anybody notice that it's hard to get through one breath without having thoughts and being distracted? I mean, this is really hard. And you could practice for years and still not get through a whole breath without getting distracted. The difference, by the way, might not be that you can stay focused longer. The difference might be your reaction when you notice that you're getting distracted. After lots of practice, you just notice it and come back. Before you've practiced a while, it's like, oh my God, I can't even follow one breath, and you get judgmental and upset. And that's a big difference, by the way. But the ability to do this is very hard, I think. So, what else with practice? Yeah. Can I stop you there for a second? Because I think you said something really important, but you said it kind of fast. That when her daughter would go to this big emotional place, you would go to a more rational place, and that each would make the other more of that. And that the possibility of connecting got lower. And, I'm sorry?
My daughter calls it the voice. You have that.
The voice, yeah, exactly. Instead, it's being a little emotional about the emotional mind without getting sucked into the vortex. Like acknowledging how painful this is, and then there's the and, right? The and, okay, so and what are we going to do about the sheets? Okay, and how can I help you feel better right now? And moving on to maybe reorienting to the next moment instead of just sitting in the misery, as opposed to, gee, it's not that big a deal to clean the sheets, which is both invalidating, although it's perfectly easy to do, it's still invalidating because you don't know this other part, and it's rational in the face of emotion. You can't, by the way, just this little therapeutic tip, okay, that we teach therapists, I don't know why we don't teach other people this, you can't treat an emotional problem with reason. Okay? Doesn't work. You can't treat a fire with fuel. Okay? You have to have an emotional solution to an emotional problem, not a rational solution to an emotional problem. Right, it wasn't about the sheets. Yeah. Yeah. Right, there was no accurate expression. So you're shooting in the dark. I mean, you're doing a really good job being mindful. Like, I can tell it's not about the sheets, so I'm looking, but it's in the dark without a flashlight. And she has to turn the light on a little and say, I'm over here. Ah, there you are, and then you can find her, and how great. And then that's a new dance you're doing, by the way, right? And all of a sudden, when she turns the light on a little and you find her and you validate, it's like, well, I might want to turn the light on sooner next time. But if you turn the light on and get clobbered, it's like, I'm staying in the dark over here. There's no fun, so. And the clobbering, by the way, I don't mean that it's an aggressive act. I mean, that's what it feels like. Remember the picture with the mom with the bullhorn and the kid, nobody actually talks to their kid with a bullhorn that way, right next to their ear. Nobody does that. But it still feels like that sometimes. Now, there's a truth. The truth is both. There's not just one here. It's not the case that the parent is not talking to the kid with a bullhorn. That's not true. It feels like a bullhorn, and the mom's not intending to do that. But it still has the, it's like patting somebody on the back you see haven't seen for a while because you really like the person. You slap them, you pat them on the back really hard, and it turns out they have a sunburn. It's like really good intentions and really painful. That's, it's just life. So anyway, great examples. Now, folks that didn't try the homework, okay, anybody need help? Something getting in the way? My instructions didn't make sense? Anything I can help with? Yeah.
I didn't do it because I didn't ask everybody, but I was thinking a lot about the exercise we did here, where you told the students that or something.
Yeah.
Somebody or whatever. And I think you're going to talk about it, but I guess I just can't figure it out.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. You said you feel more less afterwards. How are you feeling?
If you felt less angry.
Sad, some people feel confused. And then you said something about, are you angrier? And it made me think about the people I'm working with right now, because I have a particular group that is not the very, expressive, reactive kind, but they're raging. I mean, these are folks that
That's not typical for them, but they're really enraged? Is that what you're saying? Am I understanding?
No. So this group of folks that I'm working with, we get these very anxious kinds of
I see.
always do anxiety, and sometimes we get the depressive kind of, they all want to share how they hurt themselves. And this group in particular I'm working with right now is stoic, sits there and doesn't say anything. Very, very good at getting the concept totally rational, can do the
Is this a DBT skill group? Yeah.
Yes, explicit.
That's a good question. You're 3 slides ahead of me, but let's do it now. Sure, why not?
So that was my first question, and then,
Well, let's just take that.
Okay.
Hang on to the second. I don't want to suppress it, but let's take that, okay? So what do you think? Let me throw the question back to you. You're in charge of the world, okay? When do you want to teach children to be angry? When is that going to help your society function better? When is that going to help people have a better life? When is anger going to be helpful?
that interaction with parents and then the change.
Wouldn't fear be helpful then? If something's dangerous, wouldn't fear be helpful in that situation? Yeah. I think fear, right? I mean, if I'm doing something that could harm somebody, I think them being afraid, fear leads to, you know, the treatment for fear when it's dangerous is to get safety, right? I mean, help, using, you know, putting a wall between you and the danger, running away, putting people in prison who would harm you. I mean, that's the treatment for fear, is to get safe. I don't. Well, outrage is big anger. When would you want to teach children to be outraged? They might. No, I'm asking not what they might feel. I'm saying you're in charge of the world. Yeah. Okay. Outrage. Do you need to be? Wait. Hang on. One at a time. So, outrage. Okay. I agree that people do that, and sometimes that's useful. But outrage also leads to real impulsive behavior. Outrage is kind of dangerous. I got to tell you, in the world. One of the things that scares me most as a human being is when I hear on the news that some political leader is outraged by something that another person's doing. Then I start thinking, oh, where somebody's about to bomb somebody, you know? So I'm not sure I want to, I'm not sure, you're in charge, she actually, Gladys is in charge of the world, sorry, but if I were in charge of the world, I would probably never teach children to be outraged, because I think that's really dangerous, personally. I might understand. I'm just saying you're in charge of the world. You get to choose when you want them to feel it. So you can teach outrage, but that's going to scare me.
I guess this was the second question. Maybe
Okay, now go ahead.
so, they don't express anything. So
Except outrage.
Except rage.
Rage.
And the couple, I mean, not in my presence
Yeah.
recently at all.
Yeah,
But
they're really
it's
angry.
my own fear,
They're
right?
really angry, right?
Because when they have expressed it, it's been very bad.
Meaning that they become aggressive.
Yes.
Okay, so your fear is totally justified, and that's actually my point about, like, okay, so these are not kids that you're happy. You wouldn't teach anybody this level of anger,
No.
but you're asking when would it be. So when do you think anger would be a good thing to teach people?
I would think, in my mind, anger is different than rage, and sometimes
Yeah.
anger could be a motivator for somebody to act and to change.
I agree. Therapists say that all the time. I agree.
I'm a therapist and a parent.
Yeah. No. I meant that as a validating statement. You know, I think that's actually what a lot of people say. But you're free from the fact that a lot of people think that. I'm saying, do you think that works?
I do think that,
Okay. Is it necessary? Are there other ways to get motivated?
of course.
Okay.
Sometimes anger can be an emotion that's important to feel and experience and be motivated to change.
Okay.
But I think, again, it's
So
fine line
I want to be.
to-
Let me be difficult for just a second. Well, probably more often, but you know, it's intentional at this moment instead of accidental. I don't disagree with the first half of what you said, that anger could be used to motivate. Like I'm angry and I'm going to work on changing this. I'm simply asking, from a pros and cons perspective, you acknowledge that there are other ways to be motivated. Is it ever necessary to use anger for motivation, or are there other ways to do it? Because just speaking for myself, I think the downside of anger is really big. Okay, if I look around the world, I can see anger on the chain pretty much everything that either scares me or makes me feel profoundly sad about our species, I can see anger on the chain that led to that. And so that makes me very wary of anger as useful. But so when you say you could, but I also agree that you could use anger to motivate you to do things. I don't disagree. But I wonder if there are other ways to do it. We might want Gladys to not teach people to be angry, because it might teach them the other ways to get those things accomplished. That's my only point. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I don't know, where are you on this, Gladys? I'm making this difficult, I know. I can come out of the closet on my own opinion. My own opinion is that we'd be better off without anger. That's my own opinion, is that we never need anger, and that anger is in relationships, in close let me not be so big. In close relationships, let's just stick with that for a second. I would argue, I do argue, that anger is toxic. That anger is corrosive in close relationships, even when it's justified. Even when it's justified. And I would say it's often justified socially, culturally, across most cultures. Not all, by the way, but most. And I would say that's my argument, and I think that we're 3 slides ahead of where we actually are. So this is an important topic. We might as well get at it now, but I also know that's what I'm saying is very provocative, and that most therapists profoundly disagree with me. So I'm on the weird way on the outside. Yeah, I'm not saying that. By the way, that we don't get angry. We do. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
So this is really important for future leaders, and really going to be important as the family comes through. Now, quite often we have people that are largely female, and but we actually get a good number of male, and they can spend 3 sessions, and it's like wrestling with the devil over the question of anger. So we've really grappled with it, and internally we've grappled with it, so that we're kind of okay now to try and communicate. And one way that we think about it, pass it on, because they not everyone, a lot of them now not want to let it go, because it feels so genuine, so authentic, is you look at all the emotions. We'll make a list. We'll get 50 emotions on a chart. Each one of them, we talked before about here, implicated in the word is what you do. You need to pull away from it. You overcome it. Solutions to emotional things. Now jump to anger. Yes, it motivates, but implicated in the word is to tell you what to do. It really simply says, express me. I'm angry at you. And that is another word.
That's right. And in our culture, I'm angry at you means you screwed up, you've done something wrong. It's communicating judgment. So my challenge to you, and and I mean this in a very benign way, okay? It's not like a big challenge, but it's like to think about, if you can be angry without judgment, I'm willing to withdraw my complaint. Okay? If you can be angry without any judgment, I'm willing to say that could be pretty harmless. That could be pretty benign. But I think that's really hard to do, right? I think then what you have is a word like, I don't like what you're doing. And most people who are angry that doesn't feel very satisfying for the anger does not like, I don't like. By the way, in the English language, we have very, very limited ability around this topic. We have one word, anger, that actually means a whole lot of different situations. And it sounds really like it's so reasonable, okay, and so benign. And in fact, it's very hard to be more than a tiny bit angry without judgment. And I think that tiny bit of anger, I'm not worried about that. I think that's dislike. I don't like it. I wish it were different. And I'm not worried. If that's what you mean by anger, no problem with anger. But I don't think that's what we mostly do with anger. Yep. Well, it does in our current culture, but there are other ways. I think there are other things we can do when those values are challenged.
What I want to say also mentioning Matt was saying, which is for God, principles and values sometimes are really fundamental
Yep.
to our beliefs and to who we are.
Right.
And what we need to do, and hopefully the class,
Yeah, yeah.
is right principle to broken under reaction, going to radio output. So that's,
Yeah.
but sometimes I think when you say absolutely is never the good answer, we validate the principle and we validate the fundamental
Yeah.
societies and the way we function.
You know, I don't disagree with you. The only thing I would add, okay, is that I think when we say that, if, for example, if you're outraged because bully X is picking on victim Y, okay, and the bully could be an individual bully, it could be an international bully, okay, I mean, it could be a political bully, it could be a religious bully, it could be a social bully, you know, okay, I think that those are situations where I don't disagree that anger is justified. I do agree anger, like I think that's not unnatural for us to feel angry. The question though is how much, and with, as Matt says, with what action urge, okay? And so when I hear people say they're outraged, my concern is that that's so connected to aggression, okay, that worries me a lot. My opinion is, however, if you hear about a bully, you could also be really compassionate to the victim and say, my goodness, this is awful for that person, and feel really sad. And that could lead to committed action too. It's the commitment to action that we need. I don't think you have to go through anger to get to commitment. I think you can go through sadness. I think you can go through fear. I think you can go through your logical mind and you go through your principles to commitment. I'm totally in favor of having those principles, and I'm totally in favor of committed action. I mean, I'm literally, I'm right there with you. I'm concerned about needing to put anger as the way to get there. That's my big worry. For you, I'm not worried about it. I bet you could use anger to get there. I'm not worried about it. But for the rest of us, I am. By the way, I also want to say that even though I'm not worried about you becoming aggressive, by the way, I am worried about you like eating yourself up from the inside with anger. Because I don't think anger is good for relationships, and it's not good for us. Even if it gets us, even when it works to get us motivated. And I don't disagree that it does that. I just think there's a downside to it that's enormous. Now, I'm speaking as a person who I think I get as angry as anybody else in the world. I don't think I'm less angry. I just want to be clear. But I also say, every moment I look back that I've been angry, I don't look and say, gee, that really worked. I look and say, gosh, that didn't work very well. Either the outcome was crappy, I made my life worse, somebody else's life worse for a while, or I didn't. I got to some reasonable committed action, but I had to go through such pain to get there. So, and I know that the times when I can get myself to go through a different emotion to get to commitment, or to actually recognize that that's not actually what I want to do, that my life is better and the life of the people around me is better when I'm able to do that, which is not, honestly, I'm not proud. I mean, it's not that often. I mean, I'm just as angry as the next person. You know what I mean? It's just doesn't, I'm just arguing it's not helpful. And in close relationships, I'm absolutely sure of this. We have data from my lab. Internationally, maybe you can make a different argument, but with your partner, with your children, with your loved ones, good data on this. It's not good. It doesn't help. There are other ways to get there. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I agree that anger is toxic
In close relationships.
I also realize that the society tends to validate
Mm-hmm.
as a very tough emotion. I also think that we have different degrees of anger, different intensities of anger, and I think that the most toxic part is when we cannot let it go. And when there are emotions that are behind the anger, we often don't realize that are there, so we cannot address them. So the only thing that is on the surface is anger, but really there are many other things that are behind the anger, like feelings of hurt that are not being addressed.
Right, absolutely. That's exactly correct. There are other emotions. Anger is so big and it's so loud, it's very hard to see the other stuff. What I'm saying is if you could teach, she's in charge, okay, it's up to you. If you could teach people not to have the anger, those other emotions would be much more readily apparent. Imagine how lovely that would be. We could validate the other emotions. We could treat the other emotions. We could take them seriously. Yeah, go ahead. Big responsibility you've got.
Yeah, no, this is actually something I'm grappling with, because I'm wondering if, um, because they're not able to feel anything,
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if noticing anger, not acting on it, is something that's useful. I mean, I guess, I think this is what you're gonna talk about, so I'm sorry if I'm skipping ahead, but.
Oh, no, no, we're right there. That's fine. Yeah, we don't need the
I just
slides to
feel
talk
like
about it. Yeah.
I'm really actually, I have been encouraging them to be aware of the anger, because right now they're not aware of anything, and it's very explosive when it comes out. So, I'm trying to normalize the experience and trying to, help them understand that we all get angry, but we all don't kill people,
Right.
So,
Right. Right. No, no, I think your situation, let me just be clear. You've already got angry kids. Okay? So it's not, unfortunately, we gave you this job kind of late in their life. Okay? So the reality, now, it's a different question. Okay, now you got people who are really good at anger. What do we do? Well, we can't just tell them not to do it. We've got to teach them alternatives, right? And so, right, no, and I'm actually think that would be exactly the wrong thing to do for them, because that's trying to defy reality, right? No, so I'm going to talk about what to do with that in just a second. Can I give you an example, though, about the cultural thing? So Sam, sorry, I'm going to tell a story about you, okay? Y'all meet my oldest son back here, who's our technology wizard here. So when Sam was, when he was 3 months old or something, or 6 months old, I forget, you were an infant, and his mom went back to work, and I was actually his primary caregiver. But he don't remember this, but and Sam was hungry. Okay, he got hungry, and of course, I'm the dad, so I have to heat up the bottle, right? So, and in those days, I don't know what you do these days, but in those days we were told, don't do it in the microwave. So I got to put the water on the stove and put the bottle in the warm water, and so it takes a few minutes, and he's crying. Okay, no, I mean not for like hours, just for a few minutes. He's hungry. He wakes up, he's hungry, so I heat up the bottle, and a family member says, and he's just crying, and he's on my shoulder, and he's crying. He says, "Oh, he's so angry." Sees that, and it just happened to Sam. I mean, I see this all the time, and I'm 100% sure that he was hungry. Okay, that was the experience. Okay, and angry? No, he was doing what infants do, which is make noise, like take care of my needs, and there's not much language, so it's like just like I'm unhappy. If there's an emotion there, it's unhappy. It's actually probably hunger. Actually, I don't know if you're talking about hunger as an emotion, but I don't think infants have emotion about their emotion. They just have the primary experience. Okay, and so I wouldn't argue he even had emotion. It was just hunger, and pain, right? Yeah, that's all. But it was not uncommon, I've got 4 kids, it was not uncommon for me to have the experience of somebody saying, family member, person in the grocery store, and you probably had this too, it's like, oh, your kid looks so angry or something, and I don't know, I just don't, we put a lot on anger. Our culture is so supportive of anger, as Enrique, as you're saying, it's very hard to step out of it. It's supported, if you, we have this verbiage that says, if you're sad, you're vulnerable. If you're angry, you're powerful. I think it's exactly the opposite. I think if you're able to have your sadness, I think that takes more. I think it takes more courage and more strength than to be angry. Being angry is easier, I think. But that doesn't mean it's, yeah. Anyway, so back to your point. So if we look at anger at least in the case of big anger, let's just leave the little anger aside. But in case of big anger, the idea is that as a verbal person, so after you're not a baby anymore, when you get to be, I don't know, pick your age, but at least 5 and up, okay? Anger, what we call anger, is something I'm arguing is almost always, maybe not always, I don't want to take that, always is awfully big, but that anger is a secondary emotion. It's a reaction to another emotion that is the primary emotion in the situation. Okay? So your kids in your group, anger could be the common place to go. Like, for example, if I have an emotion and I don't know what to do with it, and I'm talking about this as though I'm noticing it and talking about it in my head. And I think this happens in a millisecond, okay? So it's just an as though. Have an emotion, something happens, I didn't do my homework for group, okay? Okay, now, anybody mind saying, if you didn't do your homework, what's your emotion? You got two possibilities. A little bit of guilt and shame is possible, and then the other is fear, right? Right, honestly, not because, by the way, did I do anything nasty to anybody for not doing homework? I don't even know really, did I? Right, so fear in this moment, I want you to see how fear is not justified by the present circumstances, but it is by your history. Anybody ever have a really awful experience not doing homework somewhere in your life? Yeah, exactly. So it makes sense based on history, but not based on anything that's happening in the room here. Because I completely get not doing your homework. I mean, I get it. We're busy and all kinds of things get in the way, you know. But, so it's a secondary emotion. There are two ways to get there. One is that first you can have this primary emotion, like I feel afraid or I feel guilty about it. And then you could just stop there. You could just say, well, I just feel afraid, you know, like in kids in your group. But then there's the culture. Well, no, if I feel afraid, I'm vulnerable and I'm going to get pummeled, okay? Or if I feel guilty, oh my gosh. By the way, whose favorite emotion is shame? Who loves shame? Thinks shame is just a great thing to feel. And did anybody say this is your favorite negative emotion? Right? What's your favorite negative emotion is really a funny question, isn't it? You know, I realize that. But you'd have to say, I have not yet met the person who would say that's my favorite experience. If I had to experience a negative emotion, it would be shame. I haven't yet met the person. Yet, if you think about as clinicians, our patients with borderline personality, this is like live with me, breathing shame, there's a lot of it. So, what's an easier emotion to feel? Anger. Woohoo! Yeah. So, now you can also just be judgmental, like, oh, so you expected us to do this stupid homework. The homework is now stupid, and now I can be pissed off at you instead of guilty that I didn't do it, or ashamed that I didn't do it, both of which feel really crappy. But if it wasn't so stupid, right, now I'm angry. You see, I'm not saying they're angry at you. I also think there's just practice being angry, and you got to anger a lot because it keeps people away, right? It keeps people, you push people away. Anger works. Anger, like, whew, yeah.
This is originally to me about 12 years ago. I've been married for 17 years at one point, and my ex was had gotten into opiates, and he'd been at drug rehab for 4 years, and finally I told him to get, no more.
Yeah.
And I told him to leave, and I had 3 little kids, and went back to work, and started going to therapy so that I can help my children. And, and of course I was helping myself. But the therapist that I had at the time was before I was with Richard involved in DBT, and he said, "You're angry." He used to always go over the feelings and say, "I feel sad." I said, "You're angry," and he used to try to
Yeah.
convince me that I was
Yeah.
angry. Is that
This-
I don't know.
No, there's a whole school of psychotherapy. There's a lot of people who are trained as therapists. That's a different model that says that it's all about anger, and anger is, you know, that's what they go for. That's the entire treatment is about getting you to be angry.
Yes, you are. If someone did that to you, how could you not be angry? You're angry, and I'm thinking,
Well, I think the therapist was angry. And probably deeply sad or ashamed behind it.
I just, it was really,
I had a.
at the time I thought, am I wrong? Am I not seeing my
I mean what I'm about to say in a very validating way. I once had, you know, and Perry, you might remember, on stage at a conference, had a conversation with a therapist of that stripe, and that therapist got so angry at me. I mean, I thought I was going to get punched in the nose. And I wasn't angry. I said what I've been saying to you, which is I think anger is is left over. I think it's left over evolutionarily. I don't think it serves us well, at least in its medium and big forms, at least that. You know, I don't need to be splitting hairs about what we call, you know, and this guy, I mean, I thought he was gonna kill me. He's bigger than me too, you know, so it's like, and I think he would have if we hadn't been in public.
And is judgment also a form of that other type of therapy? Because I also felt
I could be being a little judgmental, I'm sorry, but yeah, let me say it without the judgment. You know, that is a legitimate, meaning that a lot of people practice that kind of therapy, and it doesn't have data, but a lot of people do it. Yeah, so, and you know, who knows? I don't know. I mean, I'm sincere. I don't know. You know, maybe there are people for whom it is. By the way, there are people who have trouble asserting themselves. There are people who have trouble protecting themselves, and it's commonly held in the therapy world that those people have to get angry. We run, as part of our DBT program, we run a program for women victims of domestic violence, and we do not use anger to help them protect themselves. We don't. And we are very successful at helping those people get safe without using anger. So again, I'm not saying that you can't use anger to do that. I think you can, but I'm worried about the side effects of anger. So we have a different pathway, and I just want to say what I do know, we have evidence for it, is that there are other ways to accomplish it. You don't have to use anger to get safety. I'll leave you with that. I won't push my soapbox any higher before I'll crash into the ceiling. So, yeah. Yeah, sure.
And for the older people, anger looks different from, screaming, yelling. It can be that silent,
Yeah.
on the street. Once you have, judgment, that leads to something that does not look like anger. And then it becomes kind of really difficult to talk about it when you're sad, you're ashamed, and so I wonder if in those cases, is there some value in encouraging the person to kind of say, yes, I'm angry, so that then you can do the work you are encouraging us to do.
Sure. Oh no, absolutely. No, we don't want to pretend. If somebody's angry, we don't want to pretend they're not. That would be totally invalidating. I'm simply, this is the point. Once you're angry, you're angry. It's not like anger isn't real. Anger is very real. The question is, how useful is it? But even if you acknowledge it's not useful, you can't just turn it off. That means you've learned to be angry, and so we've got to learn to find other emotions. That's a hard, long process that includes acknowledging it. Yeah, you're angry, and lots of people, okay, we're in New York. What happens when somebody cuts you off in the car? What's your emotion? I'm just acknowledging where I am. People do this in Reno too, okay? People do this in Reno too. But there's a little more, I have to say, there's more expressivity in New York than there is in, say, Reno. Yeah, what are you talking about? Okay, so I'll tell you a story about my uncle, okay? My uncle, who was a New Yorker, okay? When I was a kid, this is a really sweet guy, a really lovely guy, okay? And I forget where we were, but we were out in the car, and I was with a cousin and me, and my uncle's driving, and he's just a lovely guy, okay? He's been dead for a long time, but he was a lovely guy. And he was just chatting. He was very gentle and very smart, and he had all kinds of interesting stories. And we were going to do something, I don't know, go get a hot dog or something. I don't know what it was. And so he's driving in, and it's not far from here. My aunt's still alive in a suburb, out here. And we're driving along, and we're having this lovely conversation. He's just a sweet guy, and he's about to pull into a parking space, and this other car ripped around him and pulled into the parking space. He rolled down his window and said, little kids in the car, "You fucker, what are you doing? That was my goddamn parking space, you asshole!" Okay. Rolled, this is in 1967, okay? And he rolls, because there's no power windows, and he rolls the window back up. "So what do you want to have for lunch?" Okay. Jewish. Yeah, the Jewish side of the family. Okay. No, he wasn't angry. No, that's the whole point. I mean, he was expressive. That was this is my New York joke. I'm sorry. So,
But I guess my question is, when you kind of find yourself trapped in this little cycle of like, you're angry, no, I'm not angry, yes, I'm correct, no, I'm not angry, I'm not raising my voice. Do you have like maybe kind of suggestions of how you kind of break that?
yeah, well, I don't know. You're raising your voice makes it hard for me to understand what you're upset about.
But what if the person is not really raising? You
Okay.
know that they are angry and
All right, so play it out with me, so because I'm not 100. So you're the angry one.
I'm the angry one.
Okay, so and you're upset with me.
I'm upset with you because
Okay, so what?
you took my parking spot, but now we are at the same restaurant and
Yeah. No, I completely understand why you're upset about that. I didn't realize, of course, that you were heading in there. I just saw the spot and went right for it. So, I feel kind of bad that you didn't get the spot. But obviously, you got a spot. You're here in the restaurant too, unless you're stalking me.
I don't think you understand.
Well, okay. Now let's assume that you're my sister instead of a stranger, okay? Because if you're a stranger, I'm going to get really scared, and I'm going to probably get out of the situation, okay? But if you're my sister, maybe the parking spot's not quite big enough, but so I don't know. I didn't do something.
I think you decided to
Yeah. So Sylvia, it seems like you're upset with me or something. I'm not quite sure why. I've called you a couple times. You haven't called me back. What's up? Is everything okay?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. What makes you think that I'm okay?
Well, two things, I guess. One is that that you haven't called me back when I called you, and that's not the usual thing for you. But the other is that when I just said that, you pretended I didn't say it. You just kind of ignored it. Yeah, I completely know you're busy, but I also know you, and I know that you will often at least call me back or send me a mail saying something. It's hard to stay pissed off, isn't it? See, because I'm taking you more seriously. I'm taking your primary emotion more seriously than you are.
So you're not actually calling, naming the
No.
stuff. Say, I think you're
I-
angry, but you're pretending not to be.
No. I genuinely want to know what's the matter. And I'm open, by the way, I'm keeping one little crack in the door. Like maybe you are just busy and preoccupied. Maybe this is it. So I'm not invalidating that possibility, even though I'm not convinced of it. I'm actually being respectful of what you're saying, even though I'm not quite convinced by it. But I'm open to it. I really want to understand your experience. And if you stay on that, I'll say, okay, well, gosh, it's, sounds like you've been so busy. Is this working in your life? I mean, you'd be so busy? When do you want to have lunch together? Come on, we got to. Okay, so we can take a break if people promise not to slap me during the break. Okay, is that okay? Okay. All right. So let's take. This is a great time. So let's take a 15-minute break, and I'm happy to keep chatting about this as we go along. Yeah, sure. Let me just turn this off.
It's not on, that's why. No, let's see. How strange.
Okay, let's see. How's that? That should be better. Maybe we think, it looks like it's better. Okay, great. Okay, I think it's fine. It's a complicated world. All right, great. All right, so let's march on. So I want to talk a little bit about a couple of other things about self-management. Then we're going to switch gears a little bit, and Anne and Matt and Marie Paul are going to talk about some nuts and bolts. And then if we have time, we'll do a couple of other things before lunch. If not, we'll move into lunch. Okay? So, all right. So let me just give you let's give it back to the big picture for a second. Okay? So, in the giant set of ongoing transactions we're having with each other, with our loved ones. Okay? So the idea here is that when you come into a situation, with another person, any other person, what you bring with you matters. Okay? And so really what we've been talking about is, we've been talking about the first two steps of this transaction, what we bring with us, and to try to not bring too much baggage. That's actually, the word we're using is mindfulness, okay? It's to be in this moment, not bringing all those other moments, especially not selectively only bringing the toxic moments with us, okay? So if I think about, somebody I love that I'm currently annoyed with, which I can't think of at the moment, but I'm sure there is somebody if I think long enough, right? I could only think about the thing that was annoying and bring that with me. Think about how out of balance that is. What about all those other moments that I really like this person, we enjoyed our time together, I love this person. Why am I leaving all that behind? If I've got to bring something with me, why not bring that with me, right? Because that's a context from which I will act in a very different way, right? Now, unfortunately, our brains, for whatever reason, presumably evolutionarily, our brains are much better at remembering the most recent transgression and forgetting things like this is somebody I love and have had 4,000 lovely interactions with and only 200 unpleasant ones. Or 4,000 unpleasant, but I have had 200 pleasant, okay? By the way, that's probably not a relationship that you probably want to invest a lot in, okay, in many ways. But when do we want to decide whether the ratio is 4,000 to 200 in the plus side or in the minus side? Do we want to do that when we're feeling annoyed? Right? I mean, we actually, in my lab, we study families, family processes. We do DBT research and we do family research. And what we find is not different from what, and on this one, it's very similar to what other people do, which is that if you look at a person's current emotion, okay, their current moment, and then you ask them to fill out a form about, say, how happy they are with their partner or their child. If their current emotion we use something called a PANAS, right, a positive and negative affect scale, just checklist, like these are the things I'm feeling right now. If the person is presently feeling angry with the other person, their report of the quality of the relationship is much more negative than if we have them fill out the same forms a half an hour later. If we can get them to have a pleasant interaction, change their emotion about the person, that their global statements about how often they have nice time together, not just like in this moment I like you more, but like you said, like, gee, how many pleasant interactions have you had in the last month? If you don't like me right now, you're going to say a very small number. If you like me right now, you're going to say a bigger number over the last month. Okay. Now there is probably some fact. Okay, and I don't know which of those is closer to the fact, but most people think that the bigger number is probably closer to the fact. There is a fact, like in 30 days, did we have, we had 7 fights and 5 days where we, was neutral, but then the other 12 from 30, the other 18 days where we actually had pleasant interactions. But that might be the fact if we had a constant video surveillance or something, which we don't do. Okay, so what we bring matters. In mindfulness, we can use mindfulness to bring our awareness our awareness of our goals. Is this somebody I love? Is this somebody I want to have a good relationship with? That's something we want to bring with us. In other words, when you get in the car, you want to bring an awareness of where you want to go, right? I mean, sometimes you might just want to drive around, I suppose, but then you bring that awareness. I just want to go for a ride. Okay, then you're bringing that. You don't want to say, okay, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know whether I want to go in New York. Well, let's go away for the weekend. I'm not sure if we want to go to Montreal, if we want to go to Boston, or if we want to go, to the Catskills, or if we want to go, out to, I don't know, where else would you go? South. We want to go to D.C., okay? It really matters when you get in the car. You got to point your car in some direction, east, north, west, south. You got some choices here. So that's mindfulness, an awareness of where you want to go, not where I should go, or I have to go because I don't want to go there, but where do I want to go? That's part of it. And then the second part is, if you enter into a social moment, can you bring your attention to the other person? Because that's going to do, as many of you saw last night when you practice, it's going to actually bring your heart with you. If it's somebody you love, it's going to bring a softness to your attention that's then going to have an impact on the other person and help that person be more descriptive, which makes it easier for us to then respond with a validating response instead of something else. Okay? And that's really what we're doing. It's complicated and hard, but it's really just those two steps. They're layers, and it's hard to do, but there's really those two steps. So one of the things that we can do to bring our best foot forward is to reduce our vulnerabilities, right? We have vulnerabilities too. Remember on our map yesterday we said, oh, our loved one who gets dysregulated, they have vulnerabilities that affect how they react to different events. But that's not just them, it's us too. We all have vulnerabilities, and we all have events, and that affects how big our response is. So we can take care of ourselves. If your teenager's supposed to come home at, 11 o'clock and doesn't come home till 12:30, by the way, it's 10 o'clock, your teenager's not home. Teenager's supposed to be home at 11. How do you feel? How much anxiety do you feel? It's 10 o'clock, they're coming home in an hour. And let's assume that they're pretty good about coming home on time, and they're pretty good about, where the kid is, and you don't have a long history of them not being truthful about it, okay? So you're reasonably, you're reasonably secure that they're in a safe place. I'm not trying to make this complicated for the first run here, okay? You're not, anybody feeling really anxious? No. There's maybe always a little worry if it's a 13-year-old, it's different than a 17-year-old, but, and so forth. So, and it's different if they're driving or not, and, if somebody's parents bringing them home instead of the kid's friends bringing them home. Okay, so now it's 11:15 and they're not home. How do you feel? Right, there's more concern, more arousal. Now let's just assume for a second, that you don't have a history of them coming home more than, let's give ourselves a little 5-10 minute window. People are a little late sometimes, but they don't have a history with you. You're used to them coming home on time and not falling down drunk. You're used to them, so that's what you're used to. Your history does not say, oh no. Your history says, what's going on here, right? I'm worried. Okay, so what do you do? 11:15, what do you do? Yeah, you call, right? And of course, voicemail picks up. Either the phone's off, or they're on the phone, or the battery's dead. One of those. What do you do? How do you feel? Worried, right. And so then, you do whatever you try to, let's say you don't really know. You know they were going to a friend's house, but you don't remember which friend, okay? Or they didn't tell you which friend. So you don't know who to call. You don't know where to find them, okay? It's just after midnight. How do you feel? Right, really worried at this point, right? You see how arousal's bigger now? Okay, so at 10 past 12, the door opens and there's your kid, smiling. not missing any limbs, okay? No visible blood, okay? What do you say? No, you don't. I don't believe you. She said, oh, honey, you're home. I don't think that's... What do you say? Where the hell have you been? I think that's... Is anybody with me on that? Yeah. Now, I just want to point out, this is our brain. This is the problem being a human being, okay? Our brain just did something that makes it hard, okay? Our brain had all this emotion that was totally justified by the situation. I don't know what's going on. This is not normal. I'm worried. Totally justified. And had all this arousal that when the kid walks in the door smiling, says to the brain, all that emotion is no longer justified. Kid's fine. It was justified until now, and now it's not justified. It's almost like your brain is pissed off it has all this arousal it can't do anything with. And so what does it do? It says, where the hell were you? Isn't that funny? Not like ho, 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 but you know. So that's a tricky thing. And this is just a function, you know, there are all these side effects of having a big brain, okay? You know, the advantage of having a big brain is, you know, we can go to the moon, we can build airplanes, we can have family connections. You can all be here together. You people can be out there and, you know, wherever you are in Texas and New Jersey and Italy and wherever the heck you are. You can do, you know, it's all kinds of great stuff. And there are these side effects, like a lot happens really fast and then our brains don't know what to do with it, okay? So, we can do things to make it easier for our brains to function in situations like that. Like at that moment, is that the time to have the conversation about being late, right? And why not? Assuming that you're a person who usually goes to bed at 11, right? You're tired. It's also most people eat dinner early in the evening. Your brain is used to being asleep and going into a certain metabolic state. You're actually hungry, right? Right? 6 hours of being awake since you ate. What happens in the daytime you go 6 hours without eating? You're hungry, right? 6 hours between lunch and dinner. That's normal. You're hungry for dinner, right? Isn't most people, right? So you're tired and you're hungry. Okay? I don't know, you know, there's all kinds of stuff that make you vulnerable, as opposed to in the morning, after a good night's sleep, and after having breakfast, and after your kids had a good night's sleep, and your kids had breakfast, then you can say, so, we got to do something about the late. We got to figure this out. And you know, by the way, I'm saying, you know, you do whatever you're going to, you know, grounding, you know, restricting the car privileges, or listen. I mean, there's all kinds of. I'm not saying that there aren't negative consequences for doing it. There may well be, but negative consequence is the thing that you're hoping is changing, not like you big jerk. That's not going to help the kid not be late. Understanding what got the kid late. What if the kid is late because they're supposed to get a ride home from a friend, but the friend was drinking, so they decided they didn't want to do it, and they thought you were asleep, so they didn't want to wake you, so they walked home with another friend, so it's perfectly safe, you know, with another friend that lives around the corner, and they just didn't want to call you, wake you up. What if that's true? You know, not. The next question is, what if that's a good story? You know, right? You see, it all matters, but don't we want to be regulated to be interested in that story if it's in the possibility that it's true? Okay. Anyway, so this isn't rocket science, but it is important to say, well, we have to reduce our vulnerabilities, and part of that is choosing the right time to do things. Okay. Now, part of this is vulnerabilities that are physical, and part of it is vulnerabilities that are psychological, okay, and emotional. Judgments make us reactive. Judgments give us negative emotional arousal. And those judgments do it whether the judgments are of other people, situations, or ourselves. Judgments create negative emotion. They transform the emotion that we have into something different, and they jack it up. That's what judgments do. Now, that's also true of positive judgments, okay? You say something is wonderful and beautiful, right? That also, you know, this is part of the reason why we do it. It's like if you're starting to fall in love, we make positive judgments about this person. It's not like the most wonderful person I have ever met, because it feels so exciting and lovely, right? And then, unfortunately, at some point in the future, 2 days, 2 months, 2 years later, it's like that person turns out to not be perfect. That's devastating, isn't it? So, judgment. I'm not trying to convince you not to be judgmental in a positive way, but it's got its own trickery. Anybody have a child who meets somebody and is ready to move in with them because they're the most wonderful person they've ever met, and that doesn't work out over and over and over again? But you know what I'm talking about. So that's an example of positive judgments actually creating dysregulated positive emotion that's just as impairing in some ways in terms of decision making as negative judgments create negative emotion, which impairs decision making. It's not so different. It's not immediately dangerous, but it doesn't work out in the long run. Okay? All right, so if we're letting go of judgments, my suggestion is to use anger as a signal. It's to say, I'm angry, I'm on a chain, I'm on an escalating chain. It's to say, if I'm angry, anger creates judgments, judgments create anger. They actually love each other, okay? And they spin. So if I'm angry, I could say, well, gee, what am I missing? What other emotion might there be that I'm missing? Because anger is big, it burns bright. And also, like, if I'm angry, maybe I need to use some skills, especially if this is somebody I love. I gotta be skillful and not simply attack the other person or not defend oneself. Stay in the relationship. Like, just imagine, all right, think about a moment where you said something kind of mean to someone you love, just a moment of that. What if somebody had paused your life the second before that, but you're still sentient and says, is this going to get you what you want in this relationship with this person? Okay? Or it allowed you to get regulated and then asked you that question. It would be a rare occasion where you'd say, this is really my goal, is to be nasty to my loved one. It's a rare situation that you'd really say, no, that's what I really want to do. From my heart, I want to be nasty. Most people say, no, that's not really what I want. So if you could just say, this is somebody I love, before you open your mouth, what's going to come out is different. Now, therapists have fancy words for this. Oh, no, we lost it again, Sam. Therapists have fancy words for this, including, just comes and goes. We call that stimulus control, okay? Stimulus control means that you create a stimulus that pulls for automatic responses that are healthier than what the automatic situation is pulling for. So if you remind yourself, you say, wait a minute, this is somebody I love, that pulls for, it's just harder to be nasty, right? It's easier to find compassion. It's easier to find the complexity in the moment, okay? By the way, I want to be really clear right now. The idea is not that means you're supposed to like everything the other person does. When I say anger is toxic, it doesn't mean that there can't be a lot of negative emotion, like I really don't like this. It scares me, it makes me terribly sad, I despair about it, okay? It even might offend my values. So I'm not suggesting for a second that you minimize the actual emotion you have, the primary emotion you have about the other person's behavior. It could be really powerful and big, and it is what it is. So, maybe your kid is the bully, okay, doing something to somebody else. That might really offend your values. You might really despair over that, okay? I'm not suggesting for a moment to try to minimize that. I'm simply saying anger will toxify that situation, which is already terribly difficult, okay? All right, so timing matters, we talked about that. And then there's this issue of reactivation, which I want to talk about for just a second. You ever notice, okay, did you ever notice when you're not getting along with somebody, you reach a critical threshold where you start to avoid the other person? right? It's pretty normal. I mean, this is just what people do, okay? Commonly, you know, maybe you don't, but it's very common. We find this a lot. And what happens is something like this. What we see in our lab is that people are pretty happy, okay? Pretty happy. This will be my right hand, okay? People are pretty happy. They have a lot of positive interactions. And every relationship also includes, this is my left hand, some negative interactions, okay? Some, okay? So it's not zero. A good relationship is not 100% positive and 0% negative. A good relationship is a considerably higher rate of positive than negative, okay? And actually, researchers debate about this, okay? But researchers have come up with a ratio, and it's, the argument is something like between 10 to 1 and 15 to 1, okay? I have seen as high as 20 to 1, okay? So 10 to 1 means that you've got 90% of your interactions are fairly positive, and I'm going to use the word validating, okay? Accurate expression validation, and maybe 10% are invalidating. 20 to 1 would be, you know, 95% to 5%, okay? There's a pretty hefty ratio, 10 to 1. What that means is that you can actually be, you can actually not be perfect. You can mess up once in a while, as long as in between there's some chunks of repair and decency and having fun together, okay? And it's not all talking about it. It's actually then going to the movies or going for a walk or eating dinner together and talking about your day. It doesn't have to be big stuff, okay? But what happens is, okay, now watch my hands, okay? As the relationship, as negative things go up, positive things start to come down. And this happens, you know how long it takes the average unhappy couple to seek couples therapy? The average person takes 6 years, okay? Okay, so over 6 years, slowly this happens. What happens though is this, remember I said, you know, you start to avoid, okay, so there's enough negativity that you start to avoid. Avoidance makes my right hand go plunk. Okay, it's no longer slow. It's no longer a little more negative, a little less positive, a little more negative. It's like that little bit more negative and then plunk, the positive disappears because we're avoiding each other. When we avoid each other, notice what happens is the number of negative goes down a little, but the ratio goes way up because we're avoiding all the positive and we're trying to avoid the negative, but we still get the negative because the negative is big and bursts through. So even if our total interaction number goes down, what's left is mostly the negative. So it does a trickle, 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 then flip-flop like that, okay? So now most therapists work on reducing the negative. And the world of couple and family therapy, I think, is limited by that because it's very hard to reduce the negative without rebuilding the positive. And so my humble opinion, actually, before you try to reduce, I'm suggesting we can reduce the negative by reducing anger and bringing to the table things that are better. But not necessarily having to talk to each other differently, but actually bringing up the positive is going to actually have a much bigger effect early on. You're going to be more successful at then bringing down the negative because the ratio flips. You flip it again. You know, you don't have to add a lot of positive interactions. If you're having only negative but not that many, you don't have to add a lot of positive interactions before you stop avoiding each other again. And then the ratio flips again. And then there's more motivation to work on reducing the negative. So now I call this relationship reactivation, okay, just for lack of a better term. And the good news is that it doesn't require being able to talk to each other very much. It doesn't require deep conversation. In fact, we would want to assiduously avoid the really difficult conversations during this period. So this is a little strange, okay, and I haven't yet met another therapy that would approach it this way. That's a therapeutic. But actually, you don't have to be a therapist to do this, right? Does this make some intuitive sense to anybody, right? So you can do this for yourself. You don't have to have therapy to do this. And so the idea would be to start doing things together that don't pull for all the negative baggage, right? Like simply sit in the same room and watch a movie together, right? That's all. Just It doesn't require conversation. You know, go grocery shopping together. Go shoe shopping together. You know? I don't know. Not if that's a trigger for you, of course. Sit at the same table when you're eating breakfast. And don't talk about it. Just sit at the same table and be aware we're actually in the same room together and nothing bad is happening. This is where I start with my families. I say, could you be in the room together and only breathe and notice that neither person's doing anything terrible? Actually, this is, I get a lot of headway out of this. People actually come back for a second session after we do that. It's amazing, you know? No, really, because it's like, wow, there's a human being there. This person that I've been avoiding and afraid of and angry at, who's been angry at me, and we've had nothing but negative things for 3 years. I felt really sad this week because I noticed that we've lost everything. Well, that starts to sound like a primary emotion. My goodness. And that made me long for something. It's like, oh, well, let's work on that. Let's sit at the table and eat your cereal and just notice that you're both there and that the other person is not doing anything that's offensive. Nothing problematic, nothing dangerous, nothing nasty. Just, so what if the person, tends to dribble the milk on the chin? Who cares, That's not necessarily a bad thing. It could even be endearing, okay? So, everybody with me? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Oh, great. Yeah. The timeout is tricky. Let's say 2 things about timeout. One is timeout is something that one should give oneself if you're a grown-up, okay? And once you have a teenager, giving the teenager a timeout is kind of humiliating, okay? But if they could give themselves a timeout, it's actually much more effective. Actually, I'll tell you about my little one, who's now 10. When he was about, his misbehavior was never very big, but he got an occasional timeout. And one day he just was sitting there and he was getting upset. And he said, "I need a timeout." And he went, walked out and sat down on the floor of the bathroom for probably 30 seconds and then came back. And it helped him. It was like okay, he had actually figured this out. Like, timeout is timeout. There's two things that you get with timeout. Parenting class, they tell you it's timeout from reinforcers so that you don't reinforce the dysfunction. It's true. But timeout is also an opportunity to allow your natural baseline to come back. It also is a removal from the stimulus that's triggering the arousal. So you're actually getting 2 different positive things from timeout when you do it to yourself. But timeout socially only works when there is time in. Okay? If we don't have positive interactions, I'm not getting timeout from positive interactions. I'm getting timeout only from negative interactions. All I'm doing is avoiding and escaping. So number 1 is, as long as there's time in, timeout's perfectly effective. But for the person who's afraid of abandonment, this is part 2, for the person who's afraid of abandonment, timeout is scary. This is one of the things that parents and partners have the hardest time understanding, because if you don't, honestly, I'm sure I don't have whatever that is that we call fear of abandonment, not in the way that many people do who have these kinds of problems, But here's how I think of fear of abandonment. Okay, so imagine that you're doing some mountain climbing, okay? Not exactly with ropes and harnesses, but you're free climbing up a steep mountain on a narrow path. And it's on a mountain, it's rocky, the path isn't always clear, and you've got a guide. That's what you've got your guide for, okay? But let's imagine it's in the spring and there's a lot of snow and you go snowblind, okay? Because you didn't have your sunglasses, okay? You go snowblind, and so now you're on this narrow path in the mountains, It's also slippery because it's spring, so there's water in places on the path. How do you feel about it when you can't hear your guide? Your guide goes around the corner to pee, you know? You can't hear your guide, okay? What do you say? Where are you? Where are you? Worried. Where are you? Person doesn't hear you. They're around the corner, you know? And they come back. You say, don't do that. Don't do what? Don't go pee? Right? It starts to get a little crazy, right? Right? And then, you know, you start hanging on a little tight, right? Because if, like, okay, this part's narrow. What? What? It's like, think about how desperate you are. Like, that's fear of abandonment, okay? I think that's what it feels like to have fear of abandonment, something like that. I've asked a couple patients, and they say that's what it feels like for them. It's like, it's life or death. If you leave me, it feels like I'm going to fall off the mountain to my death. I can't get by without you. Now, you might argue that that's not literally true, okay? And it's probably not literally true even in this situation, but it feels that way, okay? So time out for that person is really scary, regardless of whether it's, you know, if you're taking the time out or if you're asking me to take the time out, it can be really scary. So I just offer that caveat because although it can be extremely helpful, you also have to put it in context. If you tell the person, I'm taking 5 minutes, that's going to be much better than, I can't stand this. I don't want to do this right now when you walk away. If you say, this is really hard, I need a moment to just bring myself back, I'll be right back, that's going to be a lot easier. Okay, so I would offer that. By the way, this leads to my recommendation to you, which is to practice using your bathroom time effectively. I think I'm not talking about the automatic parts of the toilet that you use the toilet for. I'm talking about to every time you go to pee, to use that as an opportunity to notice your arousal. What am I going to bring back with me? Okay, so that when you're in the middle of a conversation, you say, I'm sorry, hang on, I got to go pee. And then you go pee, and actually, you know what? You've got 2 minutes. Most people don't follow you into the toilet, okay? And so you get to go, and you get a couple of minutes, and you can splash a little cold water on your face, and you can say, wait a minute, this is somebody I love. I'm losing sight of that. What's my goal here? What am I trying to accomplish? Is this a good time? What emotion am I missing? Of course this is upsetting for me. This is really hard. Soothe yourself, validate yourself, remind yourself of what you're trying to accomplish, and then go back out. So I think timeout is great and does that make sense? Am I answering your question? Yep. It can, that's right. If I'm feeling, if I have this fears of abandonment and then I feel scared, I feel then ashamed that I feel scared. Exactly. And then I'm more dysregulated. So that's the problem with timeout. And by the way, I don't think this is necessarily relevant, but some of you have kids who've been in relationships where they've been maltreated by partners, right? You know what I'm talking about? And in our women victims of domestic violence, they have partners who use timeout to punish the partner. Like, they know, I just need a timeout. And they're doing that to, like, basically it's like, I want you to feel terrible. But and they say it in this, like, lovely way. No, I just don't want to say anything mean, so I'm going to take a time. I'm leaving. I'll be back. Or they don't say they'll be back, and they go off in the car, in the truck, go off, and then don't come back till tomorrow. And the intention was to make you feel just suffer for the rest of the day. And there's a kind of nasty quality to that. I'm not suggesting that that's the norm. It's not the norm, but in abusive relationships, that's common. So if you have a kid who tells you about that, believe it. Believe it. It's possible. It happens a lot. Yeah. Yeah, please.
Just working in residential care, the word timeout has such a negative connotation.
Yeah.
To it mostly. In therapy and custody intervention, we appreciate using a lot of different interventions. It's what kind of rest, and spending time is really just a time. It's not
Yep.
punishment.
Right. It's not a punishment. Absolutely.
Just making sure they don't have to look at
Right.
that might be something they're saying, time out.
Yeah. Right. I agree. It can be a trigger for people. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
What we do and whether or not when we get either one
Yeah, you need some space. Or let's, I think, or, right. Yeah, well, but you just telegraph, look, you know what? We've been doing this for a while. I so want to solve this well, and I feel like I'm spent right now. So let's take a break, and let's talk about it some more later. When would you like to talk about it later? Yeah, I'm empowering you to participate. I'm not doing this to you. I'm telling you what I've reached my limit of being useful, but at the moment. But it's just like, when your car runs out of gas, you got to stop and get more. That does take a few minutes. We don't refuel as we're driving. So I think that's very good what you're saying. Okay, so. States of mind. We've talked about this. Basically, we have, one way, Marshall Linehan says, if you think about what we're doing is we're trying to find this balanced place where emotion is recognized, emotion is valued, and reason is recognized, and reason is valued. Because when we're wise, we've got both elements, right? And I want to point out that, by the way, being emotional does not mean you're irrational. It just simply, because you could be very emotional and it could be completely rational. Like you could be terribly, terribly, terribly sad because someone close to you died. That's perfectly rational and very emotional. Okay? I just want to be clear. And you can be completely rational, okay, and have a lot of emotion about it. Right? You do the books, you keep doing the books, you do it every way, and you realize, no, we're going out of business. You're really, really sad and upset about it, and it's perfectly rational. There's no way to salvage the business. Okay? So reason and emotion are not opposite. Okay? And when they're in harmony, when we say somebody's too emotional, that's not the problem. The problem isn't the person has too much emotion. The problem is they're having emotion to the exclusion of the logic of the consequences of their action. They've lost rationality. It's not that they're too emotional. There are many people who can have that much emotion without losing the logic. It's not a problem at all. And there's no such thing as being too rational. But if you're so rational and logical that you forget what matters to you, you could actually make really, really terrible decisions that seem logical, right? Logic does not exist out of context, right? Right? You can say, well, it's more logical, if you want to go to, I don't know, where do you want to go? You want to go to Boston, right, from here. How do you do that? What's the logical way to do that? Route 95 is pretty close, right? Takes you right to Boston. But what if I don't have a car? What if I don't like to drive long distances? What if I have sciatica and I can't sit for more than 20 minutes without having severe pain down my legs? I don't want to sit in a car. So now what's the way to go to Boston? Amtrak, right. Amtrak starts to sound better, right? Because I can stand around on Amtrak, right? That's different. Or, you see what I'm getting at? Or maybe, actually, just for a variety of reasons, I get car sick, I get this motion sickness, maybe I should take a plane. I should go back over to Westchester Airport and take a plane. There's a lot of, maybe I should sail through the Panama Canal. All the way, right? I got time and money. I don't have to be there. Did I say I had to go right now? No, I want to be there by September. Let's take a cruise to Boston. So the most logical depends, you have to know what the goals are. So anyway, these states of minds are important. So I just want to say that logic mind, okay, it should, okay, yesterday I was very critical of shoulds. But in a logical situation, shoulds are perfectly useful. Right? If you're thirsty, you should drink. Okay? That's not a judgment, that's logic. That's why shoulds are so complicated, because when we say them in judgmental ways, it seems like if you don't, you're being illogical, and heaven knows in our society you don't want to be illogical. Irrational is not, who wants to be irrational? So the point here is that this wise mind, what Marshall Linehan calls wise mind or wise self, is not excluding either side. It's being able to tolerate the coexistence of both reason and emotion, not throwing one out. And it's clear, it's centered. I mean, other approaches have other words for this, like authenticity and centeredness, okay? You don't have to use the term wise mind. It's quite the same thing. Okay. Now, there's one more skill here, and that is this idea of opposite action. We actually have, there's actually a very nice video that Marsha Linehan made. It's about a half an hour long that explains opposite action, and lots of Family Connections leaders like to show it. Have you all used it? Have you shown it? You don't use it? Yeah. It's available if you want to. It's about a half an hour long. But basically, the idea behind opposite action is the following. Hey, when you fall off a horse, what do? Yeah, that's opposite action, right? If you fall off a horse, you develop fear of the horse. Your grandparents knew this, well, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, maybe it's not so relevant in the 21st century, but everybody knows you fall off the horse, that means you're afraid. And the way that you get, and when you're afraid, what's your action urge? To avoid, run away, not do it. So what's the opposite action? What's the opposite of avoiding? Approaching. Do it. Do it anyway. Bring your fear with you, and what happens to your fear? You get back on the horse, you ride the horse successfully over and over again. What happens to your fear? It goes away. So opposite action is but sometimes folk wisdom is very wise, and sometimes it's abysmally wrong. In this case, right on the money. Okay, that's assuming that the horse is a safe horse, by the way. Let's not forget that. Okay, so you want to get back on the horse. When the fear is no longer justified, you use opposite action. Okay, now you can use it for fear. Sadness. What's the action urge associated with sadness? Yeah, deactivation. That's exactly right. So what's the opposite of deactivating? Activating. What happens to your sadness when you reactivate? It goes down. It goes down. There's a whole treatment for depression called behavioral activation for depression. It's got as good data as any other psychotherapy for depression, with lower relapse rates than medicine. So, and just based on that one principle, okay, and it was just, frankly, not that it's got complexity, but the basic idea is not very complicated. Okay, shame. What's the action urge associated with shame? Hide. What's the opposite of hiding? What am I doing? Here I am. Everybody, stand up in front. Expose. Okay, I was going to say expose yourself, but that has different connotations. Okay. Yeah, don't worry. Don't worry. You have to actually approach, be public. Okay. Right. And what happens to your shame? I don't know if you've had this experience. Like imagine that I borrow a book from you. It's one of your favorite books. I borrow your book because you tell me, oh, this is this great book and you've got to read it. And so I borrow it. I say, okay, great, and I want to read it. And so I actually start reading it and I really like it. And I take it with me to Starbucks and I leave it in Starbucks. Somehow I leave it on the bench there. Okay? How do I feel? I feel I'm embarrassed, right? I feel guilty. I've lost your favorite book, right? So now I have an urge to not tell you this, right? And maybe start avoiding you. And all of a sudden, like, maybe we work together and you haven't seen me in 3 days. Where's my shame? It's going up. What do I need to do? There's 2 things I need to do. This is a trickier one. I've got to buy you a new book, and I've got to tell you that I lost it. I got to say, I lost your book, and I feel really bad about it. I bought you a new book. Okay. There's actually, in a close relationship, there's actually a third thing you got to do. You've got to be willing to tolerate the other person being unhappy with you for a while. I mean, probably not over a book that you could replace, but something else, right? Now what if, this is the more important part, what if now tomorrow, by the way, let's assume it's a paperback, it's a $9.95 paperback. You read it once, I buy you the same book. You had no comments, it had no special significance, so this, and you say, oh, I read it, I didn't need to buy that for me. I mean, here, you take it, I want you to read it, I already read it, I'm not planning on reading it again. Oh, I'm so sorry about it. Oh, don't worry about it, it's no big deal. And I'm you lost the book now, and I genuinely, you can tell this is not bothering me. This does not hurt our relationship. Or if I was slightly annoyed, you repaired it. You gave me the book back. Okay, great. Okay, so it's over. For me, it's over. But now next week, you're still feeling embarrassed about it. Okay, this is your loved ones, okay? They lost the book 17 years ago, and they're still feeling embarrassed about it, okay? What does the person have to do? Keep doing opposite action. They have to keep in the relationship. They have to come back and talk to you. I'm feeling embarrassed. Not probably talk about that, because that's a little crazy, okay? I mean, it's not crazy. It makes sense, but it's not useful. And actually just come back and pay attention to the look on your face when I say, hey, how's your day? And you say, oh, I'm good, how are you? And notice that our relationship is fine. I've got to approach, not hide, approach, not hide, approach, not hide. And the shame will go down. Now, I might have to do that a lot, maybe for years, but that's going to keep the relationship going and keep the shame down. That's opposite action. Anger. What's the action urge associated with anger? Attack, right? It's use force. And so what's the opposite of attacking? There are two opposites. Yeah, be kind, right? Be decent to the other person. Be kind, you know, and treat the other person decently, genuinely. Okay, and then there's also avoid gently. Not like, oh, well, I'm not coming to your party, you jerk. It's like, you know, I wish I could come, but, you know, unfortunately, you know, I'm going to, you know, my daughter's play that night. Okay? So gently avoid, okay? And then what happens to the anger? Goes down. Now, this is why I want to point out why it's so important to sort out the primary emotion. Notice that the opposite action for anger is to avoid, one of them. Gently avoid actually could be a healthy thing to do. What if you're ashamed or sad? You get more shame and more sadness when you deactivate and hide. So if you think you're angry, but you're missing your primary emotion, so you decide, well, I'm going to treat my anger by gently avoiding, you are making yourself more miserable. Okay? This is why it's so important to find the emotion that I would call primary. Okay? And this is why treatments, I think, like anger management don't work very well. And anger management, by the way, doesn't work. Just to be clear. Yeah. I don't know. We have a difference of opinion on this in the room. You know, it all depends on how you define. Certainly, let's just give it that it could be primary. But if you could call the United Nations Human Rights Commission, it's primary. Certainly. And if you define it as, you know, dislike, annoyance, I don't like it, sure, absolutely. All kinds of things like that are primary. Once it gets to be something that's burning kind of hot, I don't think it's primary anymore. I think it's got to be secondary. Yeah. All right, so that's opposite action. Now, we've got time. So I want to, before we move on to our next module, family skills module, which is kind of short, then we'll go to validation, which we've already covered. I just want you to not worry. It looks like we've got 3 whole modules to do in just the afternoon, like we're only halfway through. We're not. We're almost done, actually. We're right on schedule. Because family skills is short. Validation, we've actually, although we'll walk through it, it's not going to take long because we've actually covered almost everything that's there. Problem management doesn't take too long. Okay, so now I want to just turn the floor over to Anne and Matt and Marie Paul. And I don't know how much, if they'll take the rest of the morning or if I'll be back before lunch, I'm not sure. But we'll have lunch soon.
Would it, if they're going to be trading off, would it be better with the handheld mic?
Yeah, probably. Good point. The handheld mic,
Yes, that makes sense, because we're going to pass it
if
out.
that's what says Sam.
I think that's been the theme generally.
Yep, he's on top of it. That's good.
No?
Talking to both of these?
Yeah, this
or
is
do you want the
this is just the chat room.
Oh, that's for the chat room, okay, and then this. Thank you. Using my eyes. Yeah, that's great. So how about we get started on this? Matt and Ann are going to come and join. Thank you. Matt and Ann are going to come and join me in just a second up at the podium. But you ready? Yeah, everybody? Excuse me, guys. Hello. All right. So a few words on behalf of NEA in general, and specifically the 7 of us at NEA who are what we call the Family Connections Committee. And just to tell you a little bit about what we do and how we do it, so you understand how it all works behind the scenes, because now you're sort of becoming part of that family. The website on which you parents signed up, and those of you who are clinicians, on our website there is a place where parents, families, can sign up to take the class, right? So the website on which you sign up is where we, the 7 of us, get names and class participant names from, right? And then behind the scenes, what we do is we organize them by geography. First, we break them down, people who want to take the class in person or by phone, and then we break them down by geography, and we give them to the appropriate leaders. Some leaders actually prefer to lead by phone. Many prefer to lead in person, and ideal is when people do both, are flexible and do both. And so then, you know, right now the system is Anne actually gets leaders together. The person who is in charge of organizing people is not here today, but Anne and her, Susie, speak and send names to you when you're ready to start the class. So we're going to go over that. Anne is going to talk about the list of leaders and what she needs from you to do that. And then what we did as a group is we put together we sort of examined what was going on because we have such a huge waiting list. And what we do is we call on you. You know, if you teach the class, it's terrific. We keep track of that. If you've not taught the class in a while, we'd like for you to come to us and say, I'm ready now. If you don't, then we call on you because the wait list is always long, right? We're generally about able to meet half the demand, which is terrific because that's about 500 to 800 people a year. It's a large number, but there's also the other half, right? And so we want to do more. So we realized that leading the classes can be daunting, and what we really want to do is make it as easy as possible for you, because you're the answer to these people who are waiting. You really are, right? Without you, I mean, the 3 of us can have the best intentions, it's not gonna happen. So without people really participating and really leading, we don't get there. All right, so that's what we're going to go through really quickly. Thank you so much for being here and for being willing to participate. And we're going to go through the 7 things that, it sounds like a lot, but actually some of them are really quick and easy. The 7 things that we would like for you to do for us. All right, you need to use both. That's for the, but you need to speak in here as well.
Okay, thank you, Mariko. I want to give a quick anecdote about bathroom mindfulness. We had a family member who was driving her daughter to her psychiatrist or for whatever, and she was freaking out in the car in Brooklyn, driving in Brooklyn. And Mom remembers that she has to go to the bathroom because she has to get away from her daughter who's attacking her. And she stops and pulls into a bar, and she calls us from the bathroom in the bar and says, I'm using my bathroom mindfulness. She just had to get away. And, you know, no judgments to the daughter. She just said, I have to stop and go to the bathroom. And she couldn't follow her because it was a bar. And she couldn't go.
Do we have more? Are there more
Yes.
documents?
Yes, there are. I put them back there. Yes. The first thing is you have a white card that Matthew gave you. And the white card mimics and is the same as the next to last page that says leader contact information. I would prefer it on a card because I'm going to be typing these in. And it's asking you for the same information. I'd like you to put your first and last name, and if you could write it legibly. You don't have to do it now. You can do it later. Yes, some of you already did it. Thank you. Yeah. Your city and state, phone number, your email, please do it legibly because I put typos in and they bounce back at me. And if you would prefer a family connections or teleconnections, which is referred in your sheets there as TLC. That means teleconnections is the TLC, which is of course where we have our greatest need. So if you can just fill that form in lieu of the one in the back, because unfortunately it's not stapled at the very back and it just ripped right out of the staple. Okay? You don't have to do that now. Okay? All right, Paul.
All right. So number 2. This was number 1. See, it's easy. Number 2. We ask you to be active leaders within limits. And what we mean by active, we have a definition of active leader. Active leader is running at least 2 classes. So they're 12 weeks long, right? 2 classes in the next 3 years. And it's an at least. I mean, these guys are amazing. They do 3 classes a year. I try to do 2 classes a year because, there's other activities with NEA. But, if you can do 2 classes in the next 3 years, you're helping us meet demand, and that's terrific. All right? And what we would like to ask is that you make every effort to start the first one of those 2 within the next 6 months. All right? Now, look, the reason why we're all here is that we live lives that are full of crises, and we get that. And we dearly hope, not for leading reasons, we dearly hope that that's not the turn your life will take in the next 6 months. If it does, we're really sorry, and of course we get it. And, take the time that you need. But assuming that you can do it, 2 classes in the next 3 years, start your next one in the next 6 months. All right? So that's number 2. Number 3 is? Yeah, a question? All right, so the question is it okay to run 2 classes at the same time? I'll tell you, I've done it. There's a couple of leaders who do it as well. It gets a little confusing if you can, take that, because you sort of wonder if you're repeating yourself. You're teaching, if you're doing it same week, then it's a little bit easier that way. If you don't, worst comes to worst, you repeat yourself, and your participants will tell you that. But you sort of forget where you are. A great part of the value of this class is that you know what's going on in people's lives. You sort of connect with them. It's easier to connect with one group of 12, 13 people who are in, living tough lives than 2. But if you can do it, it's totally fine, right? Any other questions on the being an active leader and what that means? You're good? All right. So the question is there a self-help group after Family Connections? It's not officially a part of Family Connections. There are many leaders, and Anne and Matt will talk more because they're very active in that field. There are many leaders who actually offer the possibility of reconnecting by phone 6 months later, or meeting for, an afternoon somewhere, or do something a little bit more structured and great segue. I'll pass the
Great
you
segue.
guys do that.
We do 3 Sundays we do our regular Family Connections, and the 4th Sunday we do our support group. And we send out emails, and everybody knows when to come. And those tend to be very large because there are many, many people from many different groups, and they get to meet each other, and we certainly want that conviviality, and we want them to do that. There's also on your sheet that I'm going to get to, there's the listserv. James Rosser. Hi, James, if you're here. He does a listserv on Mondays in the evening, and all of that is in your paper. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah. So on the 3rd page it says, if once you decide to do a group and you need a co-leader, and I'm going to ask you today to try to find a co-leader. If you don't have one, I'd like you to find somebody here and try to network around the room. The best ones are if you do teleconnections with each other, and if you're in the same time zone. Though we have people who are in different time zones, and if it's New York and California, it gets a little tough. But if you can do teleconnections, that's our greatest need, because there are so many places that have no family connections at all. There's not a city or an area that has a lot of people. Yeah. No, I do family connections. We do family connections. We do families. We do face-to-face right here in New York Presbyterian. And then the support group, they come to New York Presbyterian. So I don't do that group on that Sunday. No, we do 2 hours every Sunday.
It doesn't
And-
have to be sequential. In other words, it's 12 sessions, but what Ann does, and she can explain this in greater detail, she makes up a schedule and gives everybody's schedule, said, here are 12 sessions, pending things happening. Here's when we'll meet. So even with, big holidays coming up, or Easter, or Christmas, or some, whatever the holiday is that means, or if there's travel on our part, because, we have lives and we have to do things, we work and so forth. We may not be here. So it's 12, but not necessarily 12 in a row.
Right,
So in
yeah.
terms of our support group, we do 3, and then 1 week of support group, then 3 and 1, but occasionally things can.
And also, I take the temperature of the group, and I'll ask them, is Christmas Eve not good? And so we'll cancel Christmas Eve. But we're having one on the 23rd, on Sunday the 23rd, and I'm going to find out next Sunday if that's not good for the majority of the group. Let's talk about it, and I'm willing to manipulate my little calendar a little bit. So I set up a calendar, I send it to everyone, and I just sent out an email asking people to please commit. If they can't do a minimum of 10 sessions, they should take the one that we're going to do in April. If they know they're going to miss more than 2. We find that the continuity is disrupted when people come back after they've missed, say, validation, and they don't know what validation is, and we've moved on, and they have a lot of questions, and then the rest of the group is doing a little eye roll, So we try to avoid the eye rolls in there. So I'm on page 3 where it says what we ask of you for your steps. Everybody that you will get, or most people that you will get, will come through Susie Davidson, and her address is down at the bottom. Her name is Susan Davidson. And what you will do is contact me, and my email is right there. It says decide whether you want to be TLC or Family Connections. It's costello.annm@gmail. You will contact me from there, and if you need a co-leader, if you haven't found anybody, I have a list of the leaders all throughout the country, and I will try to connect you with somebody. Let me know when you're ready to do it. Now, there are a lot of steps and ways to find how to do this. We do it right here at New York Presbyterian because Perry was very kind enough to say there's an empty room there. And Sunday mornings, there's usually a lot of empty rooms. You have to be creative to find a room. The AA meetings often will have an extra room, and there's AA in most cities all over the country. And they'll often have a day when they don't meet and they can let you use the room. We get names of people through therapy centers here in Westchester. We contact them. We have a flyer, and I can send you that flyer. It's on my online. I can send that to you to show you how we do that. And it's just it would be a sample of what you could write. And we put them up at the train stations. We put them up in the grocery stores, the hospital, the local hospitals. They kind of know us now at this point, so they'll pass on names to us. When we get those names, we contact the people, and we insist that they register on NEA.BPD.com because they have to be registered. But I'll still take them, they come, and then when we start our group, I remind them, if you have not registered, please do so, because we have to have them on the NEA website. And then I'll mail you back, and I'll say, great, you're ready to go. And then we're going to forward this, and I can CC Susan Davidson when I say, great, you're ready to go. And she will send you names of people in your area, if she has enough people. And if you're TLC, she can send you lots of names. And you contact the people through email. And you keep track on the back sheet, there's a page there, of who you've contacted and who has responded, who has not responded. There's a little key there of how to do that. It tells you whether they've responded. You'll get, many times you'll get no response because they're in a better place, because we know our borderlines, our loved ones, our family members can be good until they're not. And so oftentimes there are lulls, and so they don't respond. Okay, and Susan will get back to you from the master list, but you can also get your own names also. We put ads in the paper also. Let's see. All right, make sure that, and the donation, which is also talked about down here, we always ask them to make sure they've made their donation. And many people, I guess it's $50 per person, and it's coming up. And it's coming up, right, Matthew?
Not right now, but it's going
Soon.
very soon. So we need to use this mic. We're on both. Okay, we're on to item 4. So, and we spent a lot of time in this document thinking about what's really important to pass on to leaders. So in a way, you're kind of a new batch of leader, a new batch of heroes, really, because this is the first time that this kind of information is put together in this way, and hopefully it's helpful. So item number 4, we ask that you follow the content within reason. And what does that mean? Well, Ann and I do it together. Ann sticks to the work of Perry and Allen as though it's the Bible. And she is on it. And she's had theater training, so she presents it, and all eyes are glued on her when she's doing that. I also stick close to the content, but I sort of highlight the things that jump out at me, and also all the notes from the 3rd training we've done. So I have yellow Post-its all over. I have phrases that are useful, mantras as we like to call them, that are in the document. So you should see our books during a break to see how they evolve over the time of doing it. They become pretty amazing. So there's different ways of doing it, but this is a curriculum. This is important. These are thought out skills, as you're hearing today, so we stick to it. And why? It's evidence-based. And this is great because you can have someone in the room talking about, I like my anger. Anger feels good. What are you talking about? And you keep going, well, yes, the evidence is if you follow through in this program, if you do the skills, lower burden, lower grief, greater self-mastery. And so we keep coming back to that. So it's a great thing to be able to say that we're not just here, people in Westchester, postulating things. This has been tested, and that's why it's important to stick to it. Also, a reason to stick to it's not intuitive. You give your intuitive answer, maybe right, maybe wrong, maybe somewhere in the middle. So, and also the skills aren't intuitive. These are learned skills. This is not how we live on the planet. Alan's been talking about evolving and being in the caves. This is changing from that. Also, it gives you support. So you can get those hard questions. If you have a lot of men in the group and they're wrestling with it, to go back to the material, it'll give, and especially if you do the practice, and the practice and the prep is important. You can answer the question. You have a foundation. It gives you some mastery as a teacher. And as I said, this is the 9th time we've done this. So every time we go through this, and I was talking down about this on Friday night, it gets deeper. The ideas are clear and simple, but the more you get into them, the deeper you get. So if you do this a lot of times, that prep will be really valuable. If you want to add something, simple thing we say is check with Marie Paul and the Education Committee. Run it past Alan and Perry. The only thing we really add is we come to session like this, and Alan says something I haven't heard before, or it's a little bit more different nuance, write that down. That goes into the notes, and we use that. And also, for your own support, James Rosser he runs the listserv for Family Connections, a monthly call. And I believe coming up, it's going to have topics attached to it, so when you're starting out, how you organize yourself moving through, you can call in and say, I'm in a group, someone's doing X. What do I do? And other leaders will be on and be able to help you.
All right, and this is a sub-part of 4, and it is specifically for clinicians. But before I get to that, I know we're sort of giving you a lot of stuff. You can always contact us via email or phone if our phone number is listed. I would be amazed if anybody could sort of start this without any questions. We expect that there will be questions on anything that I've spoken about, Anne has spoken about, or Matt has spoken about. Okay, it's not hard once you've done it. It's really pretty easy, but it involves a few steps. This message is for clinicians. Thank you. This is amazing that you would go above and beyond your work and be willing to do this. We're deeply thankful. and very grateful. It really does make a difference because you're helping us spread the word. A lot of parents, and I think you've heard that, do get angry at the fact that therapists very often don't get it. Those of you who are here get it. And so you're holding our hand, and it's terrific. A couple of words of warning though. As you do this class, the temptation is very, very great to bring in your own knowledge, to bring in your therapy, to teach parents the way you practice. And that's not this model. That's not how this model works. This model is proven to work the way it's been created. So what we respectfully ask of you is that you would actually be very cautious about not doing that, and that you would go through this the way. Alan is amazingly available. Perry is amazingly available. You have questions, ask them. You have suggestions, they're incredibly open to them. But we would ask you to stand back from wishing to be a therapist or to bring in things to the class that are not there without running it by them first, all right? So that's thing one. Thing two, that is very important to remember is to acknowledge the power of peer validation. So in most cases what we ask, and it's not always possible, and it is the way it is, it's fine, but what we ask is that you try to co-lead with a parent, and that you make the effort to stand back a little bit from the parent who is there, because nothing can replace that connection that a parent will have with the parents in the room. You know, having been there together, having lived that, there's a connection there that's really important. If you're running the class with another therapist, because this is the way it is in your region, that's fine. If you can really work hard at building, connections and training new leaders who are parents, you will be thankful that you did. So that's the second point. The third point that we feel very strongly about, because that's how NEA was developed, is that you can't charge for this. What you are committing to doing by being here is offering this service for free. The material is trademarked, so we're not giving it out. We're only giving it out in the class, right? And the only charge for the class is the suggested donation that we're going to be talking about. Any questions about those 3 points? Yeah. Can I pass this question to you guys? I'm not quite sure how to. I would say to you that actually it might happen less than you think, and it depends a little bit on how you introduce yourself also. If you say, I'm not here as a therapist, I'm here to help you as parents, that might hold it back. But Alan, Perry, what would you answer to that? And if I'm not mistaken, on the Behavior Tech website, there is a list of people who self-report DBT. Yeah, so by region. So you could find a few people there if you... On the Behavior Tech website. But it's self-report, as Alan said, so... Yeah. Oh, yep.
I'm looking back at number 3, and the last one, in the middle of that, it says that the opposing class is really approved and insurance.
Mm-hmm.
What's
Yeah.
my primary
Yeah.
emotion of fear? Like what is the insurance?
So NEA.BPD, well, do you want to address that, Barry, or?
We have
Yeah.
insurance out for all family connections leaders. We've never needed to use it, and then I don't know if one of us can pay for it. But we want people covered that do something happens, and anybody can sue anybody for anything. So we just want our family connections leaders to know that they're under some insurance policy. That's also why people have to go for a website, why people have to register through us. Because if we feel that there's a family connections group that we didn't know about, well, then we can't, it has to be with us. So it's a process that is made to protect you. And again, we don't believe anyone's going to sue us. There's actually a law that it's called, you might know it, through Samaritan law or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So anyhow, we do have insurance, so we don't need to worry about ever accused of having connections with anything else. Right. And insurance why you also don't want to give advice.
I have 2 questions.
Mm.
First one is, I realize that it is a first class and that donations are out. I'm wondering, the first question for one of the Alice is, they would like to have a donation after some weeks of time for a 3-month period. What can I do in that case? And my second question is, my understanding is that we will be getting handouts, and I can look for the possibility.
Okay, so those are great questions. There is a donation, actually. We do ask for a donation. Nobody is turned away for financial reasons. Matt is going to go over some of the language that we use to ask for the donation in a comfortable way. The donation is just $50 per person. You parents know this, right? And it's $75 per family. Again, Matt will go over that. If you can find a free room, well, all the better. NEA wouldn't function without, actually, the donations are not enough. We need more, but the donations are helpful to us. So if you can find a free room, or if your church, if you need to give a donation, well, then that's what needs to be done, and that can be absolutely discussed and agreed on. Absolutely, absolutely. Or you can take it as part of, you can talk to us, and if most of your participants have donated, we'll just deduct that from the total, money that has been donated towards the class by your participants. Tell me again your second question. Oh yeah, the handouts. That's a very good question. It used to be, before everybody was on email, that we would distribute the handouts. What most of us do is we send the handouts via email, and we ask people to print them and bring them with them. So this way they're the ones who absorb the cost of paper and printing. We suggest a binder, but we don't send all the modules at first, because then people won't come anymore, or some people might choose to not come. So we send the modules just the week before we cover that module. Okay?
Can I just make a comment too about cost? We had one group of family members who sent us a $300 bill for food that they had served. Didn't go well over.
Yeah.
Bottles of water each week. So just to let you know, if there's a room donation that needs to be paid, we'd like to know ahead of time. If you bring food, please ask your group members to do it. It's not something, unfortunately, maybe Sunday when we find our angel, we can afford it, but right now we can't.
And if somebody in your group has the means to cover the room donation, hey, it's really nice. It's yes, you have a question, Miriam? Sure, sure, absolutely. That's what we used to do a few years back. Absolutely, you just bring the papers. In fact, you can also bring them binders if it's possible. You know, we're happy to help you in any way that we can. We're here to be supportive, you know, so whatever you need. All right, let's talk about the donation, and here is Matt.
Well, I think we've actually covered donations, but as you know, it's an all-volunteer organization. Everyone donates their time, and the donations that we ask really are to support the NEA.BPD agenda. So I think we ask you to do it at least twice during the at the beginning and somewhere in the middle. Check that people have sort of made the donation, and as Marie Paul said, it's $50 a person, $75 a couple. That's a minimum. You can say to somebody, if you'd like to give more, because a course like this, done privately, costs a lot more. So you can say if you want to give more, but also on the other hand, if someone does not have the money, and we say this up front too, because some of these people will arrive, at least in our groups, have arrived tapped out. First mortgage, second mortgage, savings, gone. And believe it or not, $50 is a lot for them. So making that clear up front. But for those who can, really making sure that that comes in, it supports the agenda. And if you look at item 5 there, it basically gives you language to use. It talks about the mission. And the mission, of course, is information, research. It's doing events like this. It's reducing stigma. It's getting the word out about borderline, which, as you know, almost nobody really knows about, even in the professional circles. Remind people, it says there, it is tax deductible. So if they do write a check out for $1,000, that $1,000 is tax deductible. They write a check out for $40, $20 is tax deductible. They can use the website to make the donation, or they can mail a check to Tricia back there, and her address is also in that information. And as we said, try to do it twice at the beginning, because you can lose it. Once you go into the maelstrom of dealing with the material, you could forget to do that, and also at the end. And on the second page, you flip the page, there's a little email form. So if you want to ask for the donation ahead of time or by email as a follow-up, there's some language that you can use.
All right, we're getting there. Number 6, we ask that you keep an eye out for the next generation of leaders. Some of you, your life will get in the way or you will move on, and we do need to continue to pay it forward. It's actually quite easy. Within 2 or 3 meetings, you will pick out people who get it and who are excited by it and who see the difference that it makes. So within 2 or 3 weeks, and there may not be anybody in some groups, but in some groups, I had a group of 12 people, 10 of them were absolutely fabulous, and they've all become leaders and are very active. So, you'll see it very quickly. The language I use at the beginning of my classes, actually it talks to both donation and leaders, is if everybody gave only $50, and if I was the only one leading this class forever and ever, we wouldn't have an organization. So I'm asking you guys to put NEA at the top of your list of preferred charities and give as much as you can whenever you can, and to consider getting involved if it fits in your life right now. And generally that sort of starts to get people going. A key thing to look for in identifying who might be a good leader is people who give the proper kind of support, not advice, no judgment to the other group members, but the proper kind of support. So they may be having difficulty at home, but they get the skills. And when they hear other participants say some things, they're able to say, well, right there, I wonder if you could be more selfish in a healthy way, if you could take care of yourself a little bit better. So when you start hearing that, that's a good tip right there. Okay? And then number 7.
Finalement. We are going to ask you to do the last page there, and you can email these to me. It's the class completion form, and it tells you whether it's completed or they've missed classes or whatever it is. We want to keep track of all the people that you actually see, and Susan will get those. You can send them to me or you can send them to Susan Davidson, but that would be the final, your role at the end of who finished the class and who didn't. Now, I have a wealth of items on my computer under Family Connections. If you need a copy of the flyers, an example of what the flyer looks like. Also, I have, this is called Nuts and Bolts that somebody did a couple of years ago. It's about 6 pages of what happens now. And I only made 5 copies because it's just right out of my own computer. And I'll leave it right up here on the bench, and you can peruse it. But if you want it, I will forward it to you because I have it on my computer. I have also a bibliography of all the books here and there and everywhere that people have read and have recommended and that we have read. And if you would like that, and if you have something that's not on my bibliography, pass it on to me and I will include it. I also spent a lot of time taking down notes of resources. When family members come in, they will mention a particular doctor or therapy center that is really, really good. Well, I write that down and that goes into my resource. And I pass those out at the beginning. I have a list of the resources, and I have a lot from New York City, homeless shelters, things of that sort. And it's good to try to accrue as many of those as you can because family members are going to come in looking for resources. I'm always looking for resources for my kids. I'm always looking for a place where I can send them, and Kelly will tell you, I just picked her brain of what I can, where can I send my son? So it's good to have those resources because there are not a lot. We had a family member who had a sister down in North Carolina, and she said, do I have a resource? And I said, well, let me look. And I just Googled North Carolina, DBT, and they found the most fabulous person down there. So Googling does help also. It's my flyer. Yeah, that would be on my flyer. It gives all the information. It gives the dates, the place, the time. My email is on it. Any information, please call us. And we also, I think we put the 9 criteria for borderline. And we get some family members who say, oh, I'm not sure if my child is borderline, but you know, I see it in this. Or we get a lot of spouses too, by the way, and parents of adult children. We get them also, and they'll see the criteria, and they'll call us, and they'll pull it right off the train station. We put them up in the train station.
Our flyer is written, we'll send.
I'll send it to you.
It's really meant to be a one-pager. You know, nothing about this. Again, it also tells what Family Connections class is, but just don't sit around and talk.
And that it's free. Put that in bold. Yeah. So if I have your email addresses and you want me to do that, you can contact me and I can send you what it is that you want or that you need. And this nuts and bolts you can just look through. This was done by Lavinia and Michael Sachs several years ago, but I made it for the East Coast. Okay? Yes? Oh yeah, do it a week. I do it the week before. When we finish a module on Sunday, I go home and I send them the next module, so they have it the week before. I've also heard that doing a map of who your participants are and asking them to download a picture of themselves so you have a face to go with it and you set up a map on your table. The modules, they're only getting the modules the week before because, as Marie-Paul said, sometimes it gets confusing. Yes? Mm. Sure, you take a donation of anything, yeah. Mm-hmm. Anything, yeah.
Also, that just brings up another point. We had somebody whose daughter had taken over their computer.
No computer.
So that person could not get the modules, print the modules. What
We-
Ann did is she printed the modules off the session. So if that doesn't exceed your limit, you can put that in the afternoon, and you're okay with that, that's something you could do.
Right. Also, I do a snack sign up. We bring the first snack, and we try to make it really good, so everybody brings really good stuff. Set the bar high. I bring in a cake that I've made, and we stop and get fresh coffee, salmon and cream cheese. No, you don't. But it does set the bar pretty high, and we get lots of really good stuff. But I have that out all the time for snack. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, Perry has some feelings about that. The people who are most needy are the people most needy where the mother is 95, who's got borderline, or someone who has a 17-year-old living in their home at the time. You kind of have to figure it out exactly. Spouses, we always take the spouses because they're in a tough place. But we find that the people who have much older children who are not living in their home, it's maybe not as urgent. Right. But you may get people who, yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, it's tough. Wait, are you in California? Oh yeah, Donna does that. Yeah. Yeah.
In our case, whoever walks in the room, they walk in the room. Most of them have had a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder for their loved one. Some, many times they don't. And I would say the mix is different. We've had some groups where fully half the people had either suicidal ideation or suicidal threats. Other groups where it was all female, other groups it's male. And the amazing thing I would say, having done this, in terms of the work done on the individual, because this is for the individual, it makes no difference. Whatever the
It's for you.
sources of your grief and your pain, it doesn't really matter that much what exactly different diagnoses are. Understanding it's important. So the answer is they don't have to have that commonality. And one related thought in terms of our review group, which is also curriculum-based, because we just start the curriculum over again. Someone comes who is maybe the only person there whose child was threatening suicide, they come to review group and they meet people from different groups. So it's a great added resource to meet new people, if their spouse is
Yeah, we're actually going to have questions from your green cards, and we're going to come up here and you can have all the questions you want, because it's probably lunchtime, I'm guessing. Burning, yes. Mm. Wonderful, 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 wonderful. Thank you.
Great.